You've been lied to about control. They told you it's power, that if you plan enough, work hard enough, worry just the right amount, everything will go your way. But if that were true, why are you still exhausted? Why does your mind keep spinning at night, replaying conversations, predicting problems, trying to hold together a world that keeps changing anyway? The truth is, control isn't peace, it's pressure. It's a never-ending game your mind plays, chasing a feeling that never stays. But there's another way. A softer way, a wiser way. And it begins with letting go. Buddhism doesn't teach you how to control life, it teaches you how to be free in the middle of it, to breathe through change, to rest in uncertainty, to surrender not in weakness, but in wisdom. Tonight, as you listen to these calming Buddhist lessons, something deep inside you will shift. You'll stop gripping so tight. You'll feel the tension in your chest start to loosen. Your mind will quiet. Your body will soften. And your heart will remember what it feels like to trust. This isn't just another sleep audio. This is your invitation to stop resisting and start resting, to stop controlling and start flowing, to stop surviving and start surrendering. Are you ready? Let's begin. You've heard it before, just let go, but no one tells you how. You try to stop overthinking, you try to relax, you try to surrender, but the more you try, the tighter it feels. Like holding sand in your hands, the harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away. That's the trap. And this is where Zen whispers a strange, quiet truth. The key isn't to do more, it's to stop needing everything to make sense. Not everything can be solved. Not every question has an answer. And sometimes the deepest peace comes not from understanding, but from surrendering the need to understand. This is where the koans come in. At first, they sound like riddles, nonsensical, confusing, even frustrating. But they aren't puzzles you're meant to solve. They're mirrors, designed not to explain life, but to break the mind's grip on it. In Zen, a monk once asked his teacher, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" There's no answer, but something in you still listens. That's the power of a koan. It cuts through the surface of your thinking. It doesn't feed your logic, it starves it. And in the silence that remains, something softer appears, something quieter, something real. Koans show us what words cannot. They help us unlearn the lies we've swallowed since birth, that control is strength, that certainty is safety, that logic will always lead us home. But what if freedom isn't found in knowing more? What if it's found in being willing not to know? To most of us, that sounds like giving up. But to Zen, it's waking up. Zen doesn't ask you to escape life or fix it. It teaches you to sit with it, in all its chaos, all its stillness, all its mystery, especially when it doesn't make sense, especially when it hurts, especially when there is no answer. In the West, we're taught to fix everything. We're taught that effort is always the answer, that thinking harder is strength, that peace must be earned. But the mind gets tired, the chase gets heavy, and when we finally pause, we begin to see what the effort was covering up. That we are afraid. Afraid to stop running, afraid to be with what is, afraid to see who we are without the performance. And this is where Zen gives you a strange gift, paradox. It shows you that two things can be true at once. That emptiness is fullness, that the moment you stop striving is the moment you arrive, that when you accept being lost, you begin to find your way. There's a famous koan, "Without thinking of good or evil, show me your original face before your parents were born." Your mind immediately wants to answer, but it can't. So it twists and struggles, and finally, pauses. That pause is everything. Because in that pause, you stop leaning on thought. You stop holding on to language. You fall into the quiet gap behind your ideas. And in that gap you meet something deeper. The koan doesn't give you knowledge, it gives you presence. It doesn't explain life, it points you to life itself. And that's the difference. The rational mind wants control. It wants certainty, clarity, structure. But Zen asks you to step into what it calls beginner's mind, a place where you know nothing, where you stop labeling, stop managing, and start truly seeing. It's uncomfortable. At first, you'll want to close it down. Your mind will want to scream for answers. But if you stay with it, stay curious, stay soft, something begins to unfold. Not a solution, but a shift, a loosening, a sense that maybe you don't have to hold so tight after all. Zen isn't here to make you feel smart. It's here to make you feel free. And freedom often begins with failure. The failure of your mind to solve it all. The failure of your ego to control the outcome. The failure of your will to bend the world to your plan. In this space of not knowing, your heart opens. It stops fighting, it starts listening. And you begin to see what's always been here underneath the noise. A stillness that was never lost. A peace that asks for nothing. A truth that cannot be named. Many people misunderstand koans. They try to decode them like ancient puzzles. But a koan is not meant to be solved. It's meant to be lived with, sat with, breathed with. It's not an instruction, it's an interruption. A crack in your usual thinking. A whisper that says, you don't need to figure this out. You just need to be with it. The power of paradox lies in its ability to stretch your awareness, to take you beyond either or thinking, beyond right and wrong, beyond success and failure. It invites you into a place where opposites collapse, where control dissolves, where only presence remains. Here, questions don't demand answers, they become doorways. Not knowing becomes a kind of wisdom, softness becomes strength, confusion becomes a path. This is not theory, it's practice. It's the practice of not turning away, of not rushing to fix, of letting what is simply be. And it's hard, because it means facing everything you've been taught to avoid. It means sitting with discomfort. It means allowing grief and fear and doubt to move through you without resistance, without numbing, without solving. But that's where something shifts. That's where your nervous system starts to relax, because it no longer has to fight reality. It no longer has to win. It just has to witness. When you stop trying to escape what is no longer feels like a threat. The Zen path is full of these strange doorways. A master asks, does a dog have Buddha nature? The answer is mu, a word that means no, but also nothing, but also emptiness, but also everything and nothing at once. The answer doesn't teach you a fact. It invites you to fall into the space beyond answers, the place where thinking discerned, clarity is born. Clarity that doesn't come from explanation, but from experience. Not words, not logic, but seeing clearly, feeling fully, being fully here. That's why Zen monks spend years with one koan. They're not solving it, they're being reshaped by it, worn down, polished, emptied, until their mind becomes quiet enough to see without interference. You don't need to be a monk to feel this. You just need to be willing to stop arguing with life, to surrender the need to always be right, to admit that not everything can be controlled and that maybe that's okay. In fact, maybe that's beautiful. Because when you surrender control, something bigger can move through you, something wiser than your plans, gentler than your demands, something that was always there but crowded out by effort. Paradox shows you this, over and over again. That softness is strength, that rest is progress, that silence speaks. It's not about abandoning responsibility, it's about holding it lightly. It's about doing what you can, then letting go of what you can't. It's about learning the art of surrender, not as a collapse, but as a choice. The choice to stop fighting everything. The choice to breathe instead of brace. The choice to trust not in an outcome, but in your capacity to meet life as it comes. When you let go of needing life to match your ideas, life becomes lighter. You start to see what's right in front of you. The small moments, the tiny miracles, the breath, the quiet, the way the sunlight falls on the floor. That's what the koans point to, not to answers, but to awareness. They are a training in presence, in humility, in trust. They break your concepts so your heart can open. They show you that peace isn't a result of having things figured out. It's a result of letting things be. And that includes yourself. Letting go of control means letting go of who you think you should be. Letting go of the pressure to be perfect, to be prepared, to always have it together. It means being okay with being human, with being messy, with not having the answer. That's where compassion begins. That's where freedom lives. Not in the mind's endless effort, but in the heart's quiet allowing. The koan is not a dead riddle. It's a living mirror. It meets you wherever you are. It changes as you change. And each time you return to it, it shows you something new, not about the world, but about yourself. And eventually, you stop looking for the answer. You start listening to the question. You stop trying to win the game. You start stepping out of it. And in that space, peace appears. Not because everything is fixed, but because you stopped needing it to be. This is how Zen works. Not through force, through paradox. Not through knowing, through not knowing. Not through effort, through awareness. And it's not always comfortable, but it's real. Because control was never the answer, it was the cage. And surrender, that's the door. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, let your thoughts come and go. Let the questions stay unanswered. Let the tension soften. Let the mind rest. There's nothing to fix, nothing to force, nothing to hold. You're already home. Now breathe, and let go, and trust the silence. We'll continue soon. And just like that, the grip begins to loosen, not just on plans, not just on outcomes, but on something deeper, something closer, something you've been holding your whole life without even knowing it, the idea of who you are. Because beneath the need to control the world is a deeper need to protect the story of me. This story is everywhere, built over years, shaped by memories, fears, praise, pain, and labels. It whispers who you are, what you deserve, what you must avoid at all costs. It tells you what to hide, what to chase, what to prove. But what if the deepest freedom isn't found in fixing that story, but in letting go of it? This is where the Buddhist teaching of anatta, or non-self, begins. And it changes everything. Most people live inside a self they've never questioned. We say, my thoughts, my feelings, my body, as if there's a solid, unchanging me that owns all these things. But when you look closely, really closely, something strange begins to happen. That solid self, it starts to disappear. You might notice that your thoughts come and go on their own. You don't choose most of them. They just appear. Emotions, too, rising and falling like waves. Even your body is constantly changing. Cells dying, cells renewing, nothing fixed, nothing separate. So where is the self? The Buddha didn't deny that you experience the world, but he pointed out that what you think of as you is not a single thing. It's a bundle of processes, a collection of conditions. It's always in motion. And clinging to it as fixed, this is the root of suffering. Because when you believe in a solid self, you try to protect it, defend it, maintain its image. You become afraid of anything that threatens it: criticism, failure, change, rejection. You react not to what's happening, but to what it means about you. And that's where control sneaks in. You try to control situations so people see you a certain way. You try to control your own mind so you don't feel the wrong things. You try to control outcomes so they confirm your worth, but none of it holds. Because the very thing you're trying to protect isn't solid to begin with. It's like trying to hold a shadow. The fear of losing control is often the fear of losing self. But here's the turning point. When you let go of the need to be someone, you let go of the need to protect that someone. What's left is space. In that space, peace can enter. This doesn't mean you disappear. It means the false weight you've carried begins to fall away. The pressure to live up to roles, to defend a name, to prove your value, it all starts to soften. You no longer need every moment to confirm your identity. You no longer need others to validate your image. You no longer need to get everything right just to feel okay. That's what freedom feels like. Letting go of self is not a loss. It's a return to what's real before the story. The part of you that notices, feels, breathes but doesn't need to grasp. Many people fear this teaching. They think it means becoming no one, but that's misunderstanding it. Non-self doesn't mean erasing your presence. It means seeing clearly that your presence is not separate, that it's not fixed, that it's not something to protect, it's something to live through. And when you stop clinging to self, you stop clinging to control. Because control lives in the space between what is and what I think should be. And what I think should be is almost always based on the story of self. When that story quiets, what is becomes enough. The world becomes less personal, not colder, just lighter. You can be with pain without turning it into identity. You can be with joy without needing to keep it forever. You can be with uncertainty without collapsing into fear. Because you no longer need every moment to prove you exist. You simply exist. This shift doesn't happen all at once. And it's not about ideas, it's about practice, about learning to notice the places where self creeps in and says, "This shouldn't be happening to me." That's a cue. Not to fight, but to soften, to return to presence. Presence has no story. It has no image to uphold. It doesn't need to be right. It doesn't need to win. It doesn't need to protect itself. It just is. And that's where letting go becomes real. Think about how much energy is spent protecting the self-image, pretending, comparing, judging, worrying how you're being seen. That's not life. That's performance. But when you release the actor, the play dissolves, and what's left is real. In meditation, this teaching shows up in small ways. A thought arises, "I'm not doing this right." But who is the I that needs to get it right? A sensation comes, discomfort, and the mind says, "I can't handle this." But what if there is no I apart from the sensation? Each time you question the self, the illusion cracks, and with each crack, peace expands. This doesn't make you passive. It doesn't mean you can't make choices, speak your truth, or set boundaries. It means those actions come from clarity, not ego, from presence, not protection. Non-self frees you to meet each moment as it is, rather than through the filter of who you think you're supposed to be. This also changes how you relate to others. When you're not stuck in self, you see others more clearly. You stop needing them to behave a certain way just to support your image. You can listen without reacting. You can connect without performing. You can forgive without defending, because your worth no longer depends on them. It no longer depends on anything. Letting go of self also allows for genuine compassion. When you see that your pain, your joy, your fears all arise and pass like weather, you begin to see that in others too. You recognize that no one is as solid as they appear. that behind every mask is the same fragile beauty, the same impermanent dance. This isn't a philosophy to believe, it's a truth to live. And it's hard to live because it cuts deep. It cuts through pride, through shame, through the need to be special. It asks you to step out of your own spotlight and stand in the quiet light of awareness, a light that doesn't judge, doesn't divide, doesn't label, just sees. That's the heart of this teaching, to see clearly, without the distortion of self, to rest in the flow of life without trying to hold it. It's a soft strength, a quiet power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that dissolves fear. You start to notice that every moment of suffering has a trace of self clinging in it. The pain of offense, they hurt me. The sting of jealousy, they have more than me. The anxiety before a decision, what will happen to me if I choose wrong? Each time, self is the center. And each time you loosen your hold on self, suffering loosens too. Not by force, not by denial, but by clear seeing. There's a beauty in this path, a tenderness, because as you drop the armor of identity, you begin to feel life more fully. You cry more, laugh more, care more, not because you're being someone, but because you're no longer trying to be. The present moment doesn't need a character, it just needs your attention. So you begin to walk differently, you speak with less defense, you listen without needing to be the smartest voice. You move through life, not like someone trying to win, but like someone who's already free. And people feel that. They feel your presence, your softness, your openness. Because when you're not trapped in me, you create space for we, connection, stillness, trust. This isn't the end of self-awareness. It's the beginning of awareness beyond self, and it keeps unfolding. Each time you notice the urge to prove yourself, you pause. Each time you catch the story of, "I'm not enough," you smile gently. Each time you want to control, you breathe instead. You remember that you are not the thought, not the role, not the mask. You are what notices, and what notices needs nothing. That is the root of peace. To live not as a somebody needing to be seen, but as presence, quiet and whole, seeing everything. There's a story in the early Buddhist texts. A monk asks the Buddha, "Who is it that perceives the world?" And the Buddha replies, "That question does not apply, because it assumes a fixed self. And in that assumption, it creates the very illusion it's trying to solve. The answer is not a name, it's a seeing, and in that seeing, control fades, because there's nothing left to hold, and everything left to love. Let that sink in tonight. Let it move through you. Let the self-story loosen. Let silence speak. You don't need to hold yourself together. You were never separate to begin with. Just breathe and be, and feel the weight begin to lift. We'll continue soon. The more the self dissolves, the clearer it becomes what you've been chasing, never truly satisfied you. Not for long, not deeply. You reached milestones, you hit your goals, you fixed what was broken. But peace never stayed, relief always faded, and soon the chase began again. That pattern has a name in Buddhism, samsara. It's not just an idea, it's the structure of suffering, a wheel that turns over and over again. Want, get, lose, want again. Samsara is not a punishment, it's a process. It's the cycle of craving, becoming, and disappointment. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because outcomes cannot give you what you're really looking for. The truth is hard to face, but the more you try to control the outcomes of life, the more tangled you become. You want things to turn out a certain way. You plan, you anticipate. You calculate every move to avoid discomfort, to secure happiness, to lock in success. But life is not made to be shaped like clay. It's more like water constantly moving, impossible to grasp. The need to engineer outcomes comes from fear, a quiet fear that if you don't stay ahead, something bad will happen. You try to control because you want to feel safe, because you were told that your happiness depends on things going right. But what is right? Who decides? And how many times have things gone right, only to still leave you feeling restless? This is the trap of control. You think you're managing life, but life is managing you. Every outcome becomes another attachment, another hook, another expectation that sets you up to suffer when it shifts. Because all things shift. That's their nature. Even joy fades, even success ends, even health changes. You can try to hold on, but holding on is the very movement that causes pain. Samsara plays out in every moment you try to escape discomfort by rearranging the world around you. You get upset, so you change your environment. You feel insecure, so you seek validation. You feel afraid, so you try to secure every possible scenario. And for a moment it works. You feel better. You feel in control. But it doesn't last. And soon the wheel turns again. The Buddha didn't teach escape. He taught understanding. He taught that the path to freedom is not paved by controlling outcomes, it's paved by understanding the nature of the cycle itself. Samsara isn't just out there. It's in your reactions, your habits, your inner narrative. And to see it clearly is to begin stepping off the wheel. Outcome engineering means you treat life like a project. You manage your career, your relationships, your body, your thoughts as if there's a final version of you that will be okay once everything is in place. But there is no final version. There is only movement, only change, only now. The suffering of outcome obsession is subtle. It shows up in perfectionism, in overthinking, in endless planning, in the constant low-level tension of what if. It's the need to fix things before they go wrong, to optimize every detail, to micromanage what was never yours to control. This isn't freedom, it's exhaustion. And deeper still, it becomes identity. You think you are the one who makes it all happen, the fixer, the planner, the achiever, the helper. But identity based on control is fragile. Because all it takes is one twist in the story, one illness, one loss, one unexpected moment, and the entire identity begins to unravel. That unraveling isn't failure, it's grace. Because only when the pattern breaks do you see the pattern clearly. There's nothing wrong with effort. The Buddha himself taught effort. But there's a difference between effort and obsession, between intention and control. You can plant a seed, tend to the soil, water the ground, but you cannot force it to grow. The growth is not yours to command. This is the way of wise action. Do what you can, with presence, with care, but release the results. The Dharma is not a path of manipulation, it's a path of trust. Not blind trust in fate, but deep trust in the nature of reality. That life unfolds not always according to your preference, but always according to conditions. Trying to control outcomes means resisting those conditions. It means denying impermanence. It means rejecting the possibility that pain has something to teach you, that confusion can be fertile, that endings are not always tragedies, they're transitions, and often they're necessary. The more you resist the movement of life, the more you suffer. The more you allow it, the more you see that every moment carries its own kind of intelligence, even the ones that don't make sense, especially those. Samsara continues when you fight what is, when you see discomfort as a problem instead of a teacher, when you turn change into an enemy instead of a doorway. You can't stop the wheel from turning, but you can stop clinging to it. That's the shift. To meet life not with tight fists, but with open hands. To let things come and go. To respond without trying to rewrite reality. To act without needing control as a condition for peace. This doesn't mean giving up on goals or dreams. It means holding them lightly. It means remembering they are not who you are. It means doing what you do with presence and letting the rest unfold as it will. There's a story of a man chasing a horse that has run wild. He runs after it, yelling, sweating, trying to catch it. But the horse keeps moving. A wise person sees him and says, "Stop. Let the horse come to rest on its own. Then walk toward it slowly, with calm, with care." That's what it means to stop engineering outcomes. To move with life instead of against it. To let the present moment be your guide, not your obstacle. You'll notice something shifts when you stop trying to force the future. You begin to notice now. You begin to feel again. You notice the texture of things, the breath, the space between thoughts. You're not strategizing, you're arriving. And when you're here, you're enough. Samsara loses its grip when you stop chasing the next moment. The obsession with outcome is rooted in the illusion that this moment is not enough, that you are not enough, that peace lives on the other side of achievement, but peace only ever lives here. You won't find it in the result, you'll find it in how you relate to the process, in how you show up when things don't go your way, in how you breathe when nothing makes sense, in how you listen instead of forcing, in how you stay soft when the world feels hard. The beauty is that letting go of outcomes doesn't make you less committed, it makes you clearer. You stop wasting energy on fear, you stop reacting from panic, you act from clarity, from presence, from a heart that isn't trying to win but to serve. This shift also makes space for compassion. When you stop treating life like a scoreboard, you stop treating people like opponents or tools. You stop needing them to behave a certain way. You stop measuring them by what they give you. You simply meet them as they are, without needing to change them. That's where real connection begins, because outcome control always distances you from life, from others, from yourself. You're always one step ahead or one step behind. Never here, never enough, never still. But when the grip loosens, space opens, breath deepens, you begin to trust again. Not because you know what will happen, but because you're no longer afraid of what will. And that's the turning point. To live not by force, but by flow. To move not from control, but from care. To walk the path not with a map but with presence. This is what ends samsara, not escaping the world, but understanding it. Not perfecting your life, but waking up to its nature. Seeing that peace was never in the result. It was always in your relationship with the moment. That's the freedom you've been looking for. And now, as you settle deeper into this quiet space, as the thoughts begin to slow, let that truth sink into your body. Let go of the next thing, the next plan, the next version of you. Just breathe. You're already enough. And this moment is already whole. And once the chase for outcomes begins to dissolve, something else starts to come into focus. A pattern that lives underneath it all. Quiet, persistent, and often unnoticed. The craving to control. Not just to influence life, but to possess it. To possess certainty, to possess stability, to possess how others see you. This isn't the loud, obvious hunger of material greed. This is something subtler, more internal, but just as binding. In Buddhism, this craving is called lobha. It's often translated as greed or attachment. But it goes deeper than wanting more money, more things, or more status. At its core, lobha is the impulse to grasp, to pull life into your hands and try to own it. And control is one of its most clever disguises. Control doesn't always look like greed. It doesn't always feel wrong. It can appear careful, organized, productive. But beneath the surface, it's often driven by fear. The fear of uncertainty. The fear of letting go. the fear of being vulnerable, so you reach for control like a shield, like a solution. You build habits around it, identities, even values. It becomes part of how you move through the world. But the truth is, control consumes. It eats up energy, attention, peace. It turns the present moment into a task. It makes people into problems to fix or outcomes to secure. It doesn't stop with one part of life, it spreads. Soon you find yourself trying to manage everything: the future, your feelings, other people's reactions, even your own breath. This is the same energy behind greed. Greed says, "This is not enough. I must have more." Control says, "This is not secure. I must make it certain." Both are rooted in the belief that something is missing. That life, as it is, cannot be trusted. That something needs to be added, fixed, or held tighter before you can finally relax. But you never relax, because there's always more to manage, always another variable to watch, always a new problem to prevent. And so the craving continues, quietly, constantly, until your whole nervous system forgets what peace even feels like. This form of control often hides behind good intentions. You may say, "You're just being responsible, just thinking ahead, just protecting what matters." And sometimes that's true. But the line between wise care and compulsive control is thin, and it becomes clearer when you look at the energy behind it. Does your effort bring ease or tension? Does it feel spacious or tight? Does it come from clarity or from anxiety? These questions reveal the difference between wholesome action and subtle grasping, between mindful responsibility and lobha disguised as logic. The Buddha taught that greed is never satisfied. It doesn't matter how much you get if the mind is caught in craving, it will always want more. Control works the same way. Even if you succeed in shaping your environment, calming your fears, making everyone happy, the satisfaction is temporary. Soon, the restlessness returns. This restlessness is a clue. It shows that control isn't resolving your fear, it's feeding it. Every time you act from the belief that peace is one outcome away, you strengthen the craving. You reinforce the illusion that something out there will finally fix what you feel in here. But it never does. That's why relinquishing control is not about giving up. It's about waking up. Waking up to how much energy you've been pouring into a strategy that doesn't work. Waking up to the ways your attempts to manage life have actually kept you from living it. And here's where something beautiful happens. When you begin to release that grip, something unexpected opens up: compassion, because control often closes the heart. It makes you see others through the lens of expectations. You want them to behave, to respond, to agree, to change. And when they don't, irritation arises, frustration, distance. But when the craving to control softens, so does your judgment. You start to see that people are not projects, that life is not a machine, that every moment doesn't have to go your way in order for it to be meaningful. You begin to meet others with more patience, more space, more care. This is how letting go creates connection. Greed isolates. It turns the world into a resource, a means to your end. Control does the same. But compassion bridges that gap. It sees others not as problems or puzzles, but as beings moving through their own experience, just like you. And this shift doesn't require you to be perfect. It just asks you to be honest, to notice when your need to manage becomes a mask, when it hides discomfort you don't want to feel, when it replaces presence with performance. This honesty is a doorway, because once you name it, you don't have to hide from it. You can pause, breathe, notice the urge to grasp and choose something different. That's the heart of Buddhist practice, awareness that leads to freedom, not freedom through force, but freedom through clarity. You start to see the loops of craving not as flaws, but as habits. Habits that can be unlearned, softened, released. And in their place, something quieter begins to grow, a kind of kindness toward yourself, toward the parts of you that tried so hard to stay safe, that tried so hard to keep things together. That believed control would bring peace. They weren't wrong to try, they were just misled. The mind thinks grasping will bring security, but the Dharma teaches that real security is found in letting go, in releasing the illusion of control and discovering the stability that already exists underneath it, all the stability of awareness, the steadiness of presence, the reliability of breath. You don't need to grip life to meet it. You don't need to plan every outcome to move forward. You don't need to dominate the moment to feel safe. You just need to return, again and again, to what's here, to what's real, to what's already enough. And as you do, you'll notice that what felt like loss starts to feel like lightness. That letting go of control doesn't make you powerless, it makes you present. That what you thought was keeping you safe was really keeping you small. Greed clings because it's afraid. Compassion flows because it trusts. You begin to live from that trust. You begin to speak from it, to rest in it. And it doesn't mean things always go your way. It means you're no longer thrown when they don't. This is how Lobha loses its hold, not by force, but by seeing how it moves, how it whispers, how it seduces, and then choosing not to follow. Control offers temporary relief. Compassion offers lasting connection. One contracts, the other expands. And the more you choose expansion, the more natural it becomes. You'll still make plans. You'll still care deeply. But you won't be driven by that subtle hunger that says, I can't be okay unless this goes exactly how I want. You'll be okay because you're grounded, not in certainty, but in presence, not in prediction, but in trust, not in outcome, but in the simple fullness of this breath. And as you settle into that knowing, the craving softens, the grip loosens, the space opens, and you begin to see the truth you were never taught but always knew deep down. Peace isn't something you earn by controlling life. It's something you return to by releasing what was never yours to hold. Now, rest in that space. Let the heart breathe. Let the body soften. Let the mind be quiet. There is nothing to fix, nothing to force, nothing to fear. Only this stillness, only this truth. And when control begins to dissolve, when the heart softens, when the grip loosens, something deeper starts to rise. Not fear, as you might expect, but a quiet question. One that waits beneath every attachment, every craving, every plan. What happens when everything ends? It's not a question to answer. It's a truth to face. Not just once, but over and over again. The truth that nothing lasts. That no matter how much we love, build, protect, or strive, everything we hold will eventually slip through our fingers. No moment repeats. No breath is guaranteed. Every single thing you've ever known is passing. This isn't a morbid truth. It's the most honest one. In Buddhism, this is not avoided. It's embraced. Death isn't hidden in shadows. It's brought to the center of practice. Not to create fear, but to end illusion. Not to crush joy, but to clear the way for something more real. This is the essence of Maranasati, contemplation of death. And it changes how you live. Most people avoid thoughts of death. They tuck it away, treat it as distant, pretend it only belongs to later. But it doesn't. It's here, all the time, in every passing breath. In every moment that ends, in every change that moves through your life. Death is not separate from living. It's woven into it. And when you truly see this, not as an idea, but as a direct truth, your relationship with everything begins to shift. You stop wasting time trying to control what you can't keep. You start asking better questions. What really matters? Who do I want to be, knowing I won't be here forever? What am I holding on to that doesn't love me back? Maranasati doesn't teach you to obsess over endings. It teaches you to honor impermanence, to stop turning away, to look straight into the temporary nature of things and open your heart, not close it. Because the more honestly you meet death, the more fully you meet life. It strips away what doesn't matter, not by force, by truth. It silences the noise, the petty comparisons, the pride, the drama, the need to win arguments, to be seen, to chase endless more. All of it begins to fade when you see clearly what you're standing on: this breath. Only this breath. And because this breath is fragile, it is also sacred. Death doesn't take meaning from life. It gives it. It reminds you that everything is borrowed, which makes everything precious. Your time, your voice, your choices. None of it is promised. And that's not a tragedy, it's a doorway. The Buddha taught death not as a threat, but as a teacher. He encouraged monks to meditate with bones and ashes, to sit in graveyards, not to become cold but awake, to look at the body, not with disgust, but with clarity, to understand that this body too will break down, this face too will fade, this mind too will one day stop. And what then? What remains when everything you cling to disappears? What is still true when nothing is left to hold? These are not questions of despair. They are invitations to go deeper than identity, to touch the part of you that isn't separate from anything else, that doesn't need to be somebody, that simply is. Maranasati is not just about the final death, it's about the small deaths, the ones that happen every day, the ending of a season, the loss of a routine, the changes in your body, the people who drift away, the roles that no longer fit. Every letting go is a practice in dying, and every dying is a chance to wake up. But instead, we resist. We try to hold still what was always meant to move. We chase permanence in a world made of change, and that resistance, more than death itself, is what hurts. To surrender to death is not to wish for it. It's to stop pretending it isn't part of the path. It's to welcome it into the circle of life, where it already belongs. It's to meet it not with dread, but with dignity. This surrender creates space. It creates gentleness. It teaches you to move more slowly, speak more honestly, and love without holding back. Because you know nothing is guaranteed. And that makes everything matter more. Most people think they fear death, but often what they really fear is the absence of control, the inability to stop what's coming, the helplessness of having no say in when or how it ends. But Maranasati teaches you that control was never yours to begin with, and that giving it up is not weakness, it's wisdom. You start to see that everything you tried to control was already passing. Every moment you tried to secure was already changing, and in that realization, something else appears: peace. Not the peace of getting your way, but the peace of no longer needing to. This kind of surrender doesn't make you passive, it makes you present. It opens your eyes to what's in front of you, instead of what you fear or regret. It helps you show up fully, because you know you won't always have the chance. And strangely, it makes you more alive, because when you stop trying to live forever, you finally start living now. The practice of death meditation isn't only for the cushion, it's for your conversations, your relationships, your work, your decisions. When you hold death close, you begin to act with care. You speak with more kindness, you forgive more easily, you don't take things so personally, because you know they will pass. And so will you. This awareness brings clarity. What felt like a big problem yesterday now feels smaller. What seemed urgent becomes quiet. You begin to choose presence over performance, connection over control, listening over proving. That's what surrender does. It softens the sharp edges. It allows life to flow through you instead of constantly being shaped by you. You become less reactive, less attached, not numb but spacious. You can feel grief without drowning in it. You can meet uncertainty without needing to fix it. And that changes everything. You become a safe place not just for yourself, but for others. Because people feel your groundedness. They sense your calm. They trust your presence. And not because you have answers, but because you're not afraid of questions. This kind of being doesn't need to pretend. It doesn't need to perform. It simply sits in the truth and offers warmth. Maranasati doesn't make you morbid. It makes you real. It helps you stop wasting time. It helps you stop abandoning yourself. It helps you stop living like life is a rehearsal. Because it's not. Every goodbye could be the last. Every sunrise could be your final one. Every word you say matters because you may not get to say it again. This truth is not cruel. It's a kind of love. It says, don't wait. Don't numb. Don't sleep through your own life. Wake up. Look. Feel. Be here while you still can. And let that awareness move through you, not as fear, but as fuel. Let it soften your heart. Let it guide your choices. Let it remind you, gently, that there is no control, but there is presence. There is no forever, but there is now. And in now, there is everything you need. So take a breath, and let yourself feel the truth that nothing stays. And because of that, everything matters. The silence, the stillness, the sound of your breath. All of it, precious, passing, alive. Rest in that. When you stop denying death, life begins to speak more honestly. You hear things you once ignored. You feel more. You care more. But alongside this depth, another truth rises. That's harder to bear. Life isn't fair. Good people suffer. Bad people thrive. The innocent are harmed. The kind are overlooked. No matter how mindful you are, things still fall apart. And no amount of awareness stops pain from visiting your door. This is where the heart begins to struggle again, not with control this time, but with justice. You start to ask, why me? Why now? Why this? The teachings of karma enter here, not to explain everything away, but to offer a different lens. Karma doesn't mean punishment. It's not fate. It's not a moral scoreboard. Karma is cause and effect, movement and consequence, a web that stretches across lifetimes, woven not from guilt or merit, but from conditions, some seen, some unseen. You live within this web, and sometimes those threads tug in ways that feel unfair. A person is born into poverty through no fault of their own. Another carries trauma they didn't cause. You try your best, but things still go wrong. You meet hardship you didn't choose. The pain of injustice is real. But how you meet that pain determines whether it poisons you or transforms you. Blame is a quick fix. It gives you someone to hold responsible. Yourself, others, the world. But blame also traps you. It freezes the story. It keeps you tied to the wound. It says, this should not have happened, and because it did, I cannot be free. But the Dharma offers something softer: surrender, not passive acceptance, not silence in the face of harm, but the courage to meet what is, without turning it into a permanent identity. Surrendering to karmic conditions means recognizing what is here without needing to label it as deserved or undeserved. It means you stop asking, why me, and begin asking, what now? You stop demanding a perfect past and begin opening to a wise response. This isn't easy. It's radical, because the ego wants fairness, the heart wants logic. But life doesn't always deliver those things. Sometimes things just happen, not as punishment, not as reward, just as the natural unfolding of interdependent causes. You don't need to know all the causes. You just need to know what's here now. And from there, you choose. This is where real agency lives, not in fixing the past, but in how you move forward, not in changing what already happened, but in shaping what happens next. Karma is not just what's done to you, it's also what you do with what's been given. When you meet injustice with hatred, you plant seeds of more suffering. When you meet it with awareness, you plant seeds of healing. You may not see the fruit right away, but that's not the point. The point is to stop the cycle. This is not a spiritual bypass. It's not pretending everything is okay. It's not telling others to just let go of their pain. It's a path that invites you to hold your pain with presence, not with blame. And that presence is what opens space for wisdom. You begin to see that pain is not a reflection of your worth, that unfairness is not a sign of personal failure, that the suffering you carry doesn't define you, invites you to soften, to stay open, to not let the fire turn you bitter. This doesn't mean you don't protect yourself. It doesn't mean you don't set boundaries, but it means your protection is grounded in clarity, not in revenge. Your boundaries are rooted in care, not in punishment. You can walk through this world with scars and still refuse to live in resentment. You can acknowledge harm and still choose peace. You can see clearly and still forgive. Not because it's easy, but because your own freedom matters more than being right. Victimhood feels safe at first. It gives the pain a frame, but over time it becomes a cage, because you become the story. And stories, once believed too tightly, stop you from growing. To surrender in the face of karmic injustice is to step outside that cage. It's to say, yes, this happened, yes, it hurt, but it is not all that I am, and I choose not to carry it any longer than I have to. This surrender is not weakness, it is strength. It is the strength to live without dragging the past into every future, the strength to look at the pain without letting it shape your identity, the strength to say, I am more than what happened to me. You begin to see that clinging to injustice does not heal you. It keeps you in a loop. It fuels bitterness. It colors every new experience. It hardens you quietly from the inside out. But when you loosen that grip, something else becomes possible. You begin to meet others with a new kind of empathy. Because once you see that not all pain is earned, you realize others are walking through their own unseen struggles too. You begin to forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve to be free. This doesn't erase accountability, it just removes the poison. You also begin to forgive yourself. The choices you regret, the moments you wish you could rewrite. You stop treating yourself like a mistake that needs fixing. You start treating yourself like a being who's learning. That shift changes everything. You stop needing every situation to make sense. You stop needing to control every outcome. You start responding from love, not reaction, from understanding, not ideology. And your presence becomes a healing space not only for yourself, but for those around you. This is karma in motion, not the karma you inherited, the karma you are shaping. With each breath, with each decision, with each time you choose to soften instead of harden, to open instead of close. You begin to trust that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means releasing the weight. It means carrying your story, not as a wound, but as wisdom. This is the liberation that comes from surrender. Not the erasing of pain, but the transformation of your relationship to it. The understanding that life will not always be fair, but you can always be free. You can always choose not to add more suffering to what already hurts. You can always choose to walk forward, even if you don't know where the path leads. You can always return to presence, where the past has no power and the future cannot harm you. And that's where your strength lives, not in what happened, but in how you meet it. So rest here, not in the story, not in the fight, but in the silence that holds everything, in the awareness that sees clearly, feels deeply, and lets go anyway. You don't need to understand everything to heal. You just need to stop resisting what is. Once you stop clinging to stories of injustice, once the need to assign blame begins to dissolve, something quieter appears. It isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't rush in to explain or fix. It doesn't demand your attention. It waits, still, undisturbed. It's been here the whole time, beneath the noise. And when you stop reacting, you begin to hear it. Silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of space. Not a void, but a doorway. In the Buddhist tradition, this silence has a Nami-ryo Tunhi Bhava noble silence. It is not avoidance. It is not withdrawal from life. It is a deliberate stillness that creates the conditions for wisdom. It is a way of releasing the mind's grasp without needing to wrestle with it. When everything around you pulls you to speak, to act, to explain, noble silence becomes an act of freedom. Because it breaks the pattern. It interrupts the habit of always filling space. It gives you the radical permission to stop. Mental grasping is fed by constant stimulation. Thoughts feed on thoughts. Words fuel more words. The need to direct, to label, to narrate, to make sense of every single moment. This is the momentum of the mind. And most of the time, you don't even notice it. It feels normal to talk to yourself all day long, to comment on everything, to plan, review, imagine, judge. But all that grasping exhausts you. It tightens your body. It crowds your awareness. It builds a wall between you and what's actually here. Silence opens a gap in that wall. It allows the noise to settle, not by force, not by suppression, but by stepping out of the conversation. It's like stepping off a moving treadmill. The momentum is still there. The thoughts keep running, but you stop adding to them. You stop fueling them with your voice, your commentary, your constant narration. And in that pause, something shifts. You start to notice things you usually miss. The breath, the texture of sensation, the subtle currents of emotion beneath the surface. You start to hear not just what is loud, but what is true. This silence is not emptiness. It's presence. And presence heals grasping, because it doesn't need to hold anything. It doesn't need to change the moment. It allows things to arise and pass on their own. It teaches you, wordlessly, that awareness doesn't have to control in order to understand. The mind believes that control brings clarity. But in truth, clarity often arises when you stop interfering, when you stop narrating your experience and start resting in it. In silence, the compulsive habit to explain yourself begins to fade. You don't have to be understood. You don't have to perform. You don't have to convince yourself or others. You begin to trust that who you are is not what you say, it's what you notice, what you feel, what you become quiet enough to meet. This is why noble silence is such a powerful practice. It gives space for seeing, without the pressure of response, without the pressure of proving. In daily life, silence is often uncomfortable. People rush to fill it. They interpret it as awkward or cold. But that's because we're used to using words as armor, as control. We try to shape how others see us. We try to keep the moment predictable. Silence removes that control, and in its place, truth emerges. Practicing noble silence doesn't mean you withdraw from your life. It means you create spaces within it where you don't need to manage or manipulate with language. It can begin in meditation, but it expands into moments of stillness throughout your day, when you pause before speaking, when you choose not to react, when you allow yourself to sit in silence with another person and feel the connection that words can't touch. This kind of silence is not passive. It's alive, it's aware, it's awake. And it begins to train the mind to let go of constant grasping, grasping for certainty, for control, for validation. When you stop explaining your experience to yourself, you start experiencing it. When you stop naming every feeling, you start feeling it. When you stop talking over your pain, you start listening to it. This listening is the heart of noble silence. It allows everything to arise not for analysis, but for witnessing. The mind will resist. It will try to bring back the words. It will say, "What does this mean? What should I do with this? How can I fix it?" But the silence gently says, "You don't have to do anything right now. Just stay." In staying, something new unfolds. You learn that not every sensation needs a story. Not every thought needs a response. Not every emotion needs a plan. You learn that awareness can hold all of it without commentary, without defense. This opens space not only for peace, but for insight. Because insight doesn't arise from overthinking. It comes when the mind is quiet enough to receive. Silence doesn't dull your intelligence. It sharpens it. It removes the noise that clouds perception. And over time, silence begins to shift your inner landscape. It becomes not just a practice, but a refuge, a place you return to not to escape, but to remember. To remember that you are not your thoughts, you are not your opinions, you are not your reactions, you are the space that holds them all. And this space is never in a hurry. It doesn't grasp, it doesn't push, it just rests. As you deepen in this practice, you'll notice the subtle ways the mind clings to words, even kind words, even helpful ones. You'll notice the ego's desire to be heard, to be right, to be important. Noble silence shows you that these desires, while human, are not necessary for peace. You can let them be without letting them lead. Silence brings humility. It dissolves the need to control every moment. It makes room for other people's truths. It creates the conditions for compassion, not the kind you preach, but the kind you live. And in that compassionate stillness, your presence changes. You become less reactive, less defensive, more rooted. People feel it. Even if they don't understand it, they respond to it. Because true silence carries a kind of strength that noise never can. There is a silence that avoids, and a silence that engages. Noble silence is the latter. It is fully engaged, fully awake, fully here. It allows you to stop directing life and start participating in it, not from a place of control, but from a place of trust. Trust that you don't need to fill every gap. Trust that not everything needs your input. Trust that clarity arises not from grasping, but from letting go. In the beginning, silence can feel like loss, like absence, like lack. But, in time, it reveals itself as presence, as fullness, as enough. And from that fullness, you begin to live differently. You speak less, but with more care. You listen more, but with more depth. You rest more, but with more awareness. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is returning to it without the filter of control. It is living without constantly narrating. It is being without constantly managing. It is freedom not from sound, but from noise, not from responsibility, but from reactivity, not from life, but from the habit of trying to shape it into something other than what it is. Now return to this stillness. Let your breath move without needing to comment. Let your thoughts pass without needing to follow. Let your body rest without needing to explain why. Just be here. In this silence, in this moment, the silence begins to show you something that words never could. That you don't always need to push, that not every answer comes from trying harder, that peace is not found in doing more, but in allowing more. And once you've tasted this stillness not as emptiness, but as living energy, You begin to question everything you thought strength was. For most of life, strength is taught as willpower, as effort, as the inner force that drives you to overcome, to succeed, to win. You're taught to tighten your muscles, focus your mind, power through discomfort, and beat whatever stands in your way. And for a while, that works, until it doesn't. Until the pushing turns into pressure, until the effort becomes exhaustion, until your whole system is wired not for presence, but for survival. You can do everything right and still feel wrong inside. You can discipline yourself, stay motivated, push forward, and still feel like something is missing, that something is the quiet intelligence of letting go. It is the strength not of force, but of stillness. A deeper kind of power that doesn't rise from the ego, but from alignment. Still power. It doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need to resist. It doesn't need to grip every moment and bend it into shape. Still power doesn't come from the mind's demand to control. It comes from resting in the body's wisdom, in the breath, in awareness. It flows rather than fights. It responds rather than reacts. It guides without needing to force. To shift from willpower to still power is to shift the entire direction of your energy. Willpower pulls from personal effort. It says, I must make this happen. Still, power rests in natural rhythm. It says, I will listen, I will wait, I will move from clarity, not pressure. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. When you act from still power, your choices are cleaner, you waste less energy. You stop rushing into things just to avoid discomfort. You stop trying to fix things just to feel in control. You move only when something in you is truly aligned, and not before. The culture you live in glorifies effort, but effort, when it comes from ego, burns. It disconnects you from the wisdom underneath. It creates a kind of noise inside that makes it hard to hear what really matters. It rewards speed over depth, ambition over presence, doing over being. Stillness doesn't erase action. It grounds it. It clarifies it. It turns movement into meditation. It turns response into wisdom. In Buddhist practice, this kind of presence is not lazy. It's deeply awake. It notices before it moves. It feels before it speaks. It waits, not out of fear, but out of respect for what is unfolding. There is discipline here, but it's not based on self-judgment. It's based on devotion to truth, to balance, to awareness. Still power isn't about resisting effort. It's about knowing when effort is no longer needed, when what you've been forcing is actually holding you back, when your tight grip is stopping the natural flow of the moment. You begin to notice this in small ways. When you're forcing a conversation that doesn't want to happen, when you're trying to control a plan that keeps falling apart, when you're pushing yourself through a task that your body is clearly asking to rest from. In those moments, willpower wants to double down. Still power wants to pause. And it's in the pause that something becomes clear. That not everything in life is solved by doing. Some things are revealed by being. The deeper your practice, the more you sense the difference. Willpower feels like contraction. Still power feels like expansion. Willpower feels urgent. Still power feels steady. Willpower is fueled by I must. Still power flows from I am ready. Still power connects you to the wider field of intelligence that is not yours alone. It allows you to trust timing, to move with conditions, to stop needing to control the outcome before you act. You begin to work with life, not against it. You begin to trust that rest is not weakness, that waiting is not failure, that pausing is not quitting. There is wisdom in non-doing. There is clarity in stillness. This kind of energy brings softness into spaces that were once hardened by resistance. It brings breath into patterns that were suffocating. It brings light into places where you once only felt pressure. You become less addicted to momentum. You no longer chase productivity just to feel valid. You no longer confuse exhaustion with success. You begin to respect your energy. You begin to treat your life force as sacred, not disposable. Still power is deeply intuitive. It teaches you to act from the center of yourself, not from the edges. It helps you recognize the inner voice that isn't panicking, that isn't scrambling for control, but simply knows what's next, knows when nothing is next. And that knowing is enough. The shift from willpower to still power is not something that happens in one day. It unfolds in layers. It is noticed more than achieved. It is allowed more than forced. You feel it when you stop trying to meditate the right way and simply sit. You feel it when you stop trying to fix your thoughts and start witnessing them. You feel it when you stop pushing your healing and start letting your wounds breathe. You feel it when the struggle to be better turns into the willingness to just be here. Still power is what arises when the war inside you ends. It does not mean you give up effort. It means you know when effort is no longer the path. It means you trust silence more than strategies. You trust alignment more than achievement. You trust the way life moves through you when you finally stop standing in its way. This orientation shifts everything from how you relate to work to how you relate to your emotions, your pain, your decisions. You stop trying to wrestle clarity into being. You let it come. And when it does, you move. Not from fear, not from pressure, but from presence. The Buddhist path has always pointed to this kind of inner stability. Not a frozen calmness, but a dynamic, living stillness that doesn't need to rush toward or away from anything. The mind becomes like still water, not passive, but reflective, not empty, but clear. From this clarity, all action becomes skillful. Still power helps you stop making choices from fear. You begin to notice how often fear has shaped your habit. Often the need to fix, to prove, to force has disguised itself as motivation. But fear burns through energy fast. It collapses your breath. It blocks your awareness. Stillness does the opposite. It widens the field. It gives you space to respond, not from habit, but from intention. And in that space, real transformation begins. Because now, your power is not reactive, it's rooted. It's not borrowed from stress, it's born of presence. It's not forced, it flows. And the more you trust it, the more life starts to feel less like a battle and more like a conversation. One where you don't have to shout. One where you don't always need to speak first. One where you don't always need the last word. Because sometimes, the most powerful presence in the room is the one that simply listens. Stillness isn't the end of effort, it's the evolution of it. It's the moment you stop striving and start aligning. It's the moment you stop controlling and start listening. It's the moment you realize that your deepest power has never been in how hard you try, but in how gently you return. Return to breath. Return to presence. Return to the place within you that was never in a hurry. Rest there. When the body begins to rest in stillness and the mind stops reaching outward for control, something deeper asks to be remembered, not just felt, but known. This knowing isn't intellectual. It's the kind that shapes how you breathe, how you love, how you let go. It doesn't need complex language. It's simple, quiet, and sharp. It cuts through illusion with clarity, not with fear. In the Buddhist teachings, this clarity is offered in the form of the 5 remembrances. These are not poetic suggestions or spiritual ideals. They are truths, direct, unavoidable, equalizing. And for those who resist impermanence, who live with the deep hum of anxiety about losing control, they are medicine. The first remembrance, I am of the nature to grow old. There is no escaping aging. This truth confronts the mind that builds its identity on strength, youth, beauty, and time. No matter how healthy you eat, how often you move, how disciplined your routine, the body changes. Muscles weaken, joints stiffen, skin folds and fades. Trying to outpace this process only brings suffering. But when you look at it directly, without the filters of denial or resistance, something strange happens. You begin to care for your body out of kindness, not control. You respect it for what it is, a temporary vehicle, not a permanent self. This remembrance dissolves the illusion that you can freeze time, and in its place it gives you presence. You begin to live inside your body instead of managing it from the outside. You stop racing the clock. You meet yourself where you are. The second remembrance. I am of the nature to become ill. There is no way to avoid sickness. Even the strongest immune system, the cleanest diet, the best intentions cannot build a wall against the unpredictable shifts of health. The mind that depends on wellness as a condition for peace becomes afraid of change. It creates stories around pain and blames the body for not staying in control. But when you remember this truth, when you accept that illness is part of the path, not a punishment, you begin to soften your grip on certainty. You begin to meet your body not as a problem, but as a living process. You learn to stay close to discomfort without identifying with it. Illness becomes a teacher, not a threat. It shows you where you hold tension, where you push too hard, where you forget to listen. And in that listening, you start to hear what control had been drowning out. The third remembrance. I am of the nature to die. There is no escape from death. Not later, not for others, but for you. This isn't to create panic, it is to offer truth. Because once death is accepted, not feared or romanticized, but clearly seen, it brings you to the center of your life. It reminds you that every moment is passing, and none of them are promised. You don't have to waste energy trying to make life permanent. You don't have to keep waiting for the perfect moment. This remembrance wakes you up from the fog of postponement. It helps you stop waiting to live. It helps you let go of the idea that peace will arrive only when everything is finally in place. There is no perfect future. There is only this imperfect now. And once you know it's all temporary, you begin to treat it with more tenderness, less control, more reverence, less fear. The fourth remembrance. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to avoid being separated from them. This truth opens the heart by breaking the illusion of possession. You don't own people. You don't own connection. Love, at its deepest level, cannot be held. It can only be experienced and released. The attempt to secure relationships through control always creates anxiety. You try to hold people close, with plans, with expectations, with unspoken rules. You fear their departure so much that you tighten your grip. But this grip often pushes love away. The fourth remembrance invites you to loosen it, to let those you love be free, to love with openness, not attachment, to see that control kills intimacy, while surrender gives it room to breathe. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop fearing love's ending more than you cherish its presence. You begin to meet each connection as a gift, not as a guarantee. The fifth remembrance. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. They are the ground upon which I stand. In a world where so much is beyond your control, sickness, death, loss, this remembrance offers something stable. Your actions, your intentions, the energy you bring into each moment. You may not control how others respond. You may not prevent what unfolds. But you can choose how you meet it. You can choose how much awareness, how much compassion, how much integrity you bring to the situation. This remembrance restores your agency not in terms of outcomes, but in terms of alignment. You begin to focus not on how things turn out, but on whether you're living in accordance with your deepest values. This shift is what ends the anxiety of control, because you no longer need the world to behave for you to be at peace. You just need to stay rooted in your own clarity. These 5 remembrances are not meant to be recited mechanically. They are meant to be lived, to be reflected on, not from a place of fear, but from a place of honesty. They don't tell you what to do. They show you what is. They strip away the illusions that control depends on the belief in permanence, the belief in ownership, the belief that peace lies in what lasts. These illusions are what feed the compulsion to manage every detail of life. But when you look at life through the lens of these truths, your grip softens. You begin to understand that control-based anxiety isn't really about the external world. It's about internal resistance. Resistance to change, resistance to loss, resistance to reality. When that resistance ends, anxiety doesn't have anything left to hold on to. This doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It means fear won't rule you. It won't shape every choice. It won't dominate your body. You will know how to return, again and again, to breath, to truth, to presence. You will begin to walk through life more aware of its fragility, but less afraid of it. You will stop wasting energy trying to prevent the inevitable and start putting your energy where it matters, into awareness, into care, into now. Each remembrance becomes a kind of anchor. When your mind starts racing with worry, you pause and recall. This body will age. This moment will pass. Everyone I love will change. And still, I can bring kindness here. Still, I can choose how to move. This way of living is not cold. It's awake. It's grounded in reality, not fantasy. And because of that, it frees you. You no longer need perfection. You no longer need forever. You just need truth. And truth is always enough. This is how the remembrances dissolve anxiety. Not by fixing anything, but by helping you see clearly, so that what once felt threatening now feels natural. What once felt unbearable now feels intimate. What once felt like loss now feels like a return. Return to presence. Return to softness. Return to what was never yours to hold, and finally let it go. After remembering what cannot be held, the body begins to understand what the mind has been trying to resist. Letting go is not only a thought. It's something you live through your breath, your presence, your gestures, and some gestures carry more than movement, they carry meaning. When the world becomes too much to think about, the body still knows how to speak. One of its oldest, most honest expressions is bowing. Bowing is not a performance. It is not submission. It is not self-erasure. It is an embodied recognition of reality. It says, I release the illusion of being above. I meet what's here with my whole being. I place my body lower, not because I am less, but because I no longer need to rise above to feel whole. In Buddhist practice, bowing appears simple. Hands come together, the spine bends, the head lowers, but the depth behind it is enormous. Each part of the bow carries a message. The joining of hands signals union between intention and action, between self and world, between mind and heart. The folding of the body is not collapsites, a conscious choice to soften, to meet life, not by rising over it, but by touching it with humility. Humility is often misunderstood. It's seen as weakness, as lack of confidence. But real humility is strength that doesn't need display. It is clarity about what you are and what you are not. Bowing expresses this clarity without needing to explain it. When you bow, you give up the need to appear certain. You let go of trying to impress or defend. You let yourself be seen without protection. This is not about shame. It is about sincerity. The bow is a mirror, not a mask. There's a reason bowing is used in so many sacred traditions. Because the body understands something before the mind does. When you bow, something inside quiets. The performance drops. The inner judge pauses. What's left is presence, not as concept, as posture, as movement. You bow to the cushion before you sit, not because the cushion is holy, but because presence is. You bow to your teacher, not to worship them, but to acknowledge that learning requires openness. You bow to others, not to make yourself smaller, but to meet them without defense. Each bow becomes a practice in surrender, not a passive collapse, but an active choice. A choice to not cling, a choice to not rise. A choice to kneel inwardly and say, I am willing to meet life without needing to conquer it. Bowing helps soften the part of you that wants control. It interrupts pride, which often wears the face of confidence but is fueled by fear. It interrupts resistance, which appears as strength but hides deep discomfort. Bowing says, I am not here to win, I am here to wake up. It is also a practice in trust. When you lower your body, you trust the ground will hold you. You trust that nothing in you breaks when you let go of image. You trust that truth does not require you to be tall. In Zen temples, practitioners may bow dozens or hundreds of times in a day, not out of ritual habit, but as a way to reset the mind. Every bow is a new beginning. Every bow interrupts momentum. Every bow says, I return. This return is not dramatic. It is quiet, but its power lies in repetition. Over time, bowing changes your posture, not just in the body, but in life. You begin to walk with less urgency. You speak with less defense. You listen with less resistance. Not because you are trying to be spiritual, but because your body remembers how to yield. Yielding is not defeat, it is allowing. Bowing teaches you to allow not in theory, but in motion. There's a sacredness in this gesture that words cannot touch, because it is not about philosophy, it is about direct experience. You don't think a bow, you feel it. And in that feeling, the ego thins. The heart opens. In a world that teaches you to stand tall, to speak louder, to take up space, bowing teaches you something else. It teaches you how to step aside without disappearing, how to honor without needing credit, how to serve without needing praise. When you bow, you let your body say what your words cannot, that you are willing to let go of roles, of expectations, of tension, that you are willing to be present in a way that doesn't demand, that you are willing to stop fighting the moment. This changes how you relate to others. You begin to bow internally, even when you don't do it physically. You listen not to respond, but to receive. You stop needing to prove your point in every conversation. You start to feel the connection beneath the conflict. And it changes how you relate to yourself. You stop needing to win your inner battles. You stop yelling at your mind to be quiet. You begin to bow to your thoughts, not in agreement, but in understanding. You bow to your fears, not to give them power, but to stop pretending you're above them. Every bow becomes an invitation to meet life as it is, with reverence, with respect, with readiness. There is no end to this practice. It deepens the more you return to it. You begin to bow not only in meditation halls, but in your daily moments. Before a difficult conversation, after a long breath. In the quiet pause between tasks, bowing becomes a thread that ties awareness to action. It helps you slow down. It helps you see clearly. It helps you stay soft in a world that rewards sharpness. You learn to bow to your limits, to your confusion, to the days that don't go how you hoped. You bow to the people who challenge you, not because they are right, but because they show you what you still resist. You bow to endings, because they ask you to let go. And you begin to see that bowing doesn't shrink you, it returns you to your actual size, which is not the size of your achievements, your image, your stories, but the size of your heart when it no longer needs to protect itself. This is why bowing is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the body teaching the mind how to yield with dignity. It is the spirit remembering that depth does not need height. It is the gesture that says, I am not above life. I am part of it. And in being part of it, I am already whole. Let your next breath be a bow. Let your next moment be a bow. Let your entire life become a bow. After enough bows, the heart no longer stands apart from anything. The illusion of separateness, of being alone in your experience, begins to soften. You begin to sense a larger présence above you, not outside of you, but among you. Something invisible holding you, not through control, but through connection. The next unfolding is not about doing anything alone. It's about remembering that you were never supposed to. This remembering has a name in the Buddhist path, Sangha, often translated simply as community, but it's more than that. It's not just a group of people gathered around shared ideas. It's a sacred container where the Dharma becomes real, not through theory, but through relationship, not through talking about awakening, but by being witnessed through your forgetting and your remembering. When practiced deeply, Sangha is not just support, it is surrender. Because to belong to a true spiritual community is to release the need to always be right, to always stand out, to always protect your self-image. It's not about finding people who always agree with you. It's about staying with people who reflect back the parts of you you can't always see yourself. This kind of community asks you to put down your personal agenda, your constant need to direct everything, your subtle ways of seeking control through performance. It invites you into something larger than your preferences, something wiser than your opinions, something stronger than your individuality. That doesn't mean you lose who you are. It means you remember who you are beyond the defenses you've built. The Sangha becomes the mirror where those defenses are softened, where your edges are seen but not judged, where your silence is held, not filled, where your efforts are not compared, but simply honored. In true community, you stop needing to fix everything yourself. You begin to trust that others can hold part of what feels heavy. You stop needing to be strong all the time. You allow space to be uncertain, to be undone, to be vulnerable without shame. That trust is not instant. It's earned through shared presence, through sitting together, through listening without interruption, through being with others in both joy and mess. The Sangha doesn't rescue you. It stands with you, quietly, faithfully, patiently. Being in Sangha means giving up the fantasy of individual control. It means learning to walk together, even when it's slow, even when it's not your pace. It means making room for differences and knowing that practice continues even in the discomfort. That surrender can happen in conflict too, if you remain open to listening without needing to be the one who wins. Community is not always comfortable, and that's the point. It challenges your ideas of how things should go. It exposes your tendencies to isolate or to dominate. It reveals where you still cling to being the one who knows or the one who hides. It asks you to be seen in your wholeness, not just in your strengths. This is what makes Sangha a practice, not a convenience. It is not a curated social group. It is a space for awakening through the friction and the harmony of human contact. Through the real-time unfolding of personalities, patterns, and presence. And within this field, something powerful happens. You begin to trust what is shared more than what is separate. You stop idolizing your own view. You stop protecting your sense of control. You start listening with more humility, speaking with more care, holding space with less urgency to change it. That shift is where real transformation begins. Because now you are not leaning on just your own willpower, or your own interpretations, or your own story. You are resting in something collective, something woven from intention, from effort, from presence, that is sustained not by one person, but by many. The wisdom of Sangha is not loud. It moves through shared rituals, shared silence, shared repetition. The bow you offered earlier becomes part of the group rhythm. The silence you practiced alone now becomes a silence that holds many. The letting go that felt personal becomes relational. You start to notice that your practice doesn't just affect you, changes the atmosphere around you. Your inner surrender becomes a ripple that touches others without effort. There is accountability here, too, but not the kind rooted in guilt or pressure. It is the quiet reminder that your choices echo, that your reactions don't live in isolation, that how you show up matters not just for your path, but for everyone's. This is the surrender of egoic independence. It is the shift from self-improvement to collective awakening. It teaches you how to step back when needed, to step forward when called, to listen when it's not your turn to speak, to stay present when discomfort arises, to hold space for others even when you feel tired. And in doing so, you learn something will carry you, something you didn't create, but that you contribute to by your presence. Sangha is not a place to get your way. It's a place to let go of your way, so something deeper can emerge. A shared field of mindfulness, a net of compassion, a rhythm that isn't about any one person but includes everyone. You learn to sit in circles, not in thrones. You learn to speak from the heart, not from performance. You learn that being part of something greater is not about disappearing, it's about dissolving the need to be central. This kind of community becomes a living Dharma, not just a reflection of teachings, but a teacher in itself. It teaches you patience when things feel slow, forgiveness when things feel messy, trust when you feel unsure, and it gives you a place to return to when your own voice feels too loud or too lost. You also begin to feel the power of shared energy. Sitting alone has its depth, but sitting together deepens presence in ways that can't be explained. There is strength in breathing together, in walking together, in bowing together. Something happens in the space between bodies that can't happen in solitude. Stillness is amplified. Awareness is supported. The longing to control becomes easier to release when you feel held. This doesn't mean Sangha is perfect. It means you stop needing it to be. You start relating to community with maturity, not just from your wounded parts. You begin to trust the imperfections as part of the practice, the misunderstandings, the awkward moments, the repairs, the silence after conflict. It's all part of learning to love without conditions. Sangha teaches that spiritual growth is not just an internal journey, it is how you show up with others, how you serve without being seen, how you soften without giving up your voice, how you stay when it's easier to leave. You surrender not by disappearing, but by letting go of needing to be right, important, impressive. You surrender by trusting the invisible threads that hold the group together, the collective rhythm, the shared silence, the common vow to wake up. This trust becomes a ground you didn't know you needed. It allows you to stop performing, to rest without isolation, to feel supported without losing your individuality. It allows you to be part of something sacred without needing to shape it. And when you walk away, something stays with you. A memory not of faces or names, but of presence, the quiet strength of being held, the wisdom of being mirrored, the beauty of not being the center of your story for once. Let yourself settle into that now. Let the idea of mine dissolve. Let yourself be part of something wide and silent and kind. Let community become your teacher. The moment you feel held by something larger than yourself, by community, by shared silence, by the act of simply being seen without performance, a subtle layer of urgency begins to unravel. Not because your responsibilities disappear, but because you begin to question the pace at which you've been chasing life. The pressure to always be ahead, to catch up, to not fall behind. The constant measuring of days and hours, the background anxiety that time is running out. When community slows you down, something within whispers, must you keep rushing? This question leads directly into one of the most profound teachings in the Dharma Nikaya, impermanence, not just as an idea, but as a direct, continuous experience. Nothing lasts. Not youth, not health, not certainty, not even this breath. It is arising and ending over and over. And yet, instead of bringing peace, impermanence often triggers fear, because it reveals a truth most people work hard to avoid. Time cannot be controlled. You were taught to manage time, to maximize it, to use it wisely, to plan for it, protect it, and not waste it. But this relationship with time often becomes a source of suffering, because time begins to feel like a threat, a resource you're always losing, a shadow chasing you. And with that comes anxiety, the fear that you're behind, that you won't finish, that life is passing you by before you've figured it all out. Buddhist practice doesn't remove impermanence. It invites you to become intimate with it, not conceptually, but viscerally, to notice how everything is changing right now, to witness the flow of moments not as something to manage, but as something to meet. You start to see that trying to control time is like trying to hold a river. The tighter you grasp, the more it slips through. This shift doesn't make you indifferent, it makes you wiser. You stop organizing your life around the illusion of permanence. You stop postponing joy. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to rest, or breathe, or begin again. You understand that presence isn't found at the end of your to-do list. It's available now if you stop pushing. The surrender of time is not laziness, it's a form of reverence. You begin to honor the moment, not because it will last, but because it won't. That understanding brings you closer to what's real. You drink your tea with more awareness. You listen more carefully. You show up more completely, not because you're trying to make the most of time, but because you know you're not promised another chance. Letting go of time, anxiety, also means letting go of the idea that you should be somewhere else in your life, that your progress should look different, that you're falling behind. Buddhism offers no milestone to reach, no clock to beat. It only asks you to be here, and being here is enough, because this is the only place awakening can happen. You start to notice how often you measure your day in terms of productivity, how often you feel guilty for resting, how often you speed through the present to get to the next thing. But when you live like that, time is no longer alive, it becomes mechanical, something you serve rather than inhabit. Impermanence teaches you that every moment is fresh, that what happened 5 minutes ago no longer exists, that what's coming cannot be controlled. So why spend this breath regretting the last one or fearing the next? Each moment holds the potential for a complete return. This return is the essence of mindfulness. It's not about stopping the flow of time, it's about not getting swept away by it. You begin to move differently, you begin to respond instead of react. You feel your breath while walking, you pause before speaking, you notice the light changing across the floor. These are not small things, these are the ways you return to reality. Time doesn't need to be mastered, it needs to be met. When you release the compulsion to schedule every moment, life begins to unfold in its natural rhythm. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, sometimes nothing happens, sometimes everything changes in an hour. Control cannot guarantee outcomes, but presence can guarantee that you're alive for all of it. The deeper you move into this awareness, the more compassion arises for yourself and for others. You realize that everyone is moving through time with the same uncertainty, that nobody knows how much time they have left, that grief is always close and love is always fleeting, and from that softness, urgency begins to transform. It's no longer about racing. It becomes a quiet commitment to not miss what's here. This includes your emotions. You stop rushing through sadness. You stop avoiding discomfort. You stop needing every moment to feel pleasant. Instead, you stay. You feel what you feel. You let it move. You trust that it too will pass, as everything does. Impermanence doesn't just apply to joy. It applies to pain. No state is permanent. No mood defines you. Nothing sticks. And knowing this gives you permission to stop resisting what's here now. Your relationship with plans also shifts. You still make them, but you stop worshipping them. You stop collapsing when they change. You stop judging yourself when they fall apart. You understand that control over time is partial, not total. You bring intention, not demand. You begin to hold your calendar like you hold your breath with presence, but not with panic. This kind of surrender also brings healing to your nervous system. Constant urgency keeps the body in fight or flight. It creates pressure in the chest, tension in the jaw, shallowness in the breath. But when you surrender to time's flow, when you allow impermanence to guide rather than threaten you, the body begins to relax. Your breath deepens, your heart rate slows, your shoulders drop. This is not because everything is going your way, it's because you're no longer resisting the way things go. This surrender allows you to prioritize differently. You stop doing things just to stay busy. You start doing what nourishes, what aligns, what feels true. You don't rush through life looking for meaning. You move slowly enough to feel it. You also begin to relate differently to others. You speak with more intention. You forgive faster. You express love more easily. You don't wait for a better time to say what matters. Because you know time doesn't wait. You know every conversation could be your last. This is not tragedy, it's clarifying. You stop postponing your own life. You stop saying, someday. You stop waiting for the perfect alignment of circumstances. You see that now is the only time you will ever have to be kind, to be awake, to be alive. Letting go of control over time means releasing the story that life must unfold according to your plan. That your value depends on efficiency, that your worth is tied to productivity. It means seeing that the deepest joy is not in having more time, but in showing up fully to the time you're given. The practice is simple, not easy, but simple. Breathe, pause, listen, let time move through you. Let it teach you, let it show you that every moment contains everything. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. This is what frees you from the anxiety of the clock. You begin to live not by the ticking of seconds, but by the rhythm of presence. And that presence is always now. When the urgency to control time dissolves, what remains is not chaos but a deeper kind of quiet. You begin to see that even your most detailed schedules, your most carefully drawn timelines, your most perfectly laid out goals are not guarantees. They are outlines sketched on water. They are shapes drawn from hope, from memory, from fear, but not from reality. And this leads to a deeper truth. It's not just time that moves beyond your control, it's everything. This is where the teaching of sunyata, or emptiness, begins to open. Emptiness does not mean nothingness. It doesn't mean that life is meaningless or hollow. It means that things do not exist in the solid, independent, permanent way your mind assumes they do. Nothing stands alone. Nothing stays the same. Nothing can be fully captured or fixed, not even your best plans. Plans seem like stability. They give you a sense of direction, of predictability, of purpose. But when you cling to them too tightly, they turn into burdens. They create expectations that reality often refuses to follow. You end up fighting the moment because it doesn't match what you imagined. And this fight creates tension. Not because something went wrong, but because you believed that things were supposed to go only one way. Sunyata invites you to see through that illusion. It teaches that all things are empty of fixed identity. Every experience, every person, every event is shaped by conditions. Those conditions are always shifting. What looked solid a moment ago begins to dissolve. What you thought was certain suddenly changes shape. Your plans, no matter how wise or detailed, are also empty in this way. They are made of thoughts, hopes, assumptions, cultural ideas of success, personal definitions of progress. They are not wrong, but they are not truth. They are tools, and when you mistake a tool for reality, you begin to suffer. Strategic surrender is the practice of using plans without being trapped by them. It means you honor your intentions, but you remain available to the unexpected. You learn to adapt without panic. You move with clarity, but not with rigidity. This is not a rejection of responsibility, it's a more intelligent way of holding it. You plan because direction is useful, but you surrender the outcome because you know that control is partial, always conditioned, never absolute. When you live from this understanding, your relationship to the future changes. You stop needing to define every step before you begin. You stop needing to know exactly how things will unfold. You make room for mystery not as something to fear, but as something to work with. This mindset brings relief. It allows you to exhale, to stop trying to calculate every possibility, to stop editing your plans every time a new worry appears. It frees your attention for the moment you are in. The idea of a fixed future becomes softer. You start to hold your goals more lightly. You still care, but you no longer collapse when things shift. You no longer cling to the identity of the planner. You allow the plan to serve the process, not to control it. This surrender deepens your patience. It gives you space to grow through uncertainty. It helps you listen more carefully to what's unfolding rather than forcing something that isn't ready. You begin to see that some things need time, some paths need silence. Some answers come not from effort, but from waiting. When you cling to plans, you often miss what's actually happening. You overlook opportunities because they don't look like what you expected. You rush through lessons because they don't fit your schedule. You reject detours that might have opened something new. Sunyata reminds you that what feels like delay may actually be realignment. What looks like failure may be a shift in conditions that you couldn't have predicted. What seems like confusion may be the beginning of a deeper clarity. In this view, surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. It's the wisdom that recognizes you're not the only force shaping your life. That life is collaborative, that it includes causes and effects far beyond your control. And that doesn't make you powerless. It makes you part of something much more alive. You begin to move with more humility. You stop expecting life to bend to your schedule. You stop fighting what shows up. You start welcoming change, not because you like it, but because you trust that it belongs. This doesn't mean you stop planning. It means your planning becomes a kind of listening. You start with intention, but you remain open. You look at your calendar not as a command, but as a possibility. You leave space for life to shape you, not just for you to shape life. The more you embody this, the more peaceful you become. Because you're no longer in constant resistance. You're not trying to control every outcome. You're not living in fear that things will fall apart. You know they might, and you know you can still show up. Sunyata also frees you from the pressure of identity built around achievement. When plans become rigid, they often carry not just tasks, but definitions of self. You start to believe that if the plan fails, you are a failure. that if something doesn't go your way, it reflects who you are. But emptiness teaches that identity is also not fixed. You are not your success. You are not your timeline. You are not your progress report. You are the awareness that moves through all of it. This awareness can shift direction without losing center. It can let go without collapse. It can begin again without shame. Strategic surrender is not indecision. It is precision in the presence of uncertainty. It is knowing when to pause, when to adjust, when to release. It's the difference between holding something firmly and holding it tightly. One gives energy, the other drains it. This understanding also changes how you relate to others. You stop expecting people to fit your vision. You allow relationships to evolve. You stop demanding that everyone move at your pace, think the way you think, agree with your plans. You begin to honor the emptiness in others, their shifting needs, their changes, their timing. You start to see that life isn't something to master, it's something to dance with. And dancing requires presence more than planning. It requires response more than control. This doesn't mean everything becomes effortless. It means you stop wasting effort where it isn't needed. You conserve energy, you move with rhythm, you work with conditions, not against them. Sunyata teaches that everything is connected, but nothing is fixed. It asks you to release the illusion of permanence and meet what is actually here. Plans become one expression of your heart's direction, but they are not the whole map. They are not the end. You still set goals. You still act. But you no longer believe that peace waits on the other side of completion. You find it in the middle of unfolding. This shift brings simplicity. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to defend every choice. You begin to speak from clarity, not from defense. You move from integrity, not from fear. You begin to live your life as a conversation, not a script. Let this moment be that conversation. Let your next breath be unscripted. Let the shape of your life remain soft enough to change. Once you stop gripping tightly to plans, once you see that no path is ever fully solid beneath your feet, a different kind of tenderness begins to rise. Not a softness that turns away from life, but one that bows more deeply to it. And this tenderness shows itself most clearly in the places where attachment is strongest, especially in the ones we love the most. In no area is this more vivid than in parenting. The moment someone becomes a parent, something ancient awakens, an instinct to protect, to guide, to shape, to make things right. But within this love, attachment grows easily. And soon, without meaning to, control sneaks in. You start planning not just your life, but theirs. You carry expectations for who they will be, how they will behave, what they will achieve. You feel their pain as your failure, their choices as your reflection. Their freedom starts to feel like a threat to your identity as a good parent. The teachings of the Buddha offer an unexpected mirror here, especially in the Jataka Talas, the stories of his past lives. These stories are more than folklore. They are parables of compassion, patience, non-attachment, and presence. They reveal that parenting is not about possession, it is about care without clinging. In many Jataka tales, the Buddha appears not just as a teacher, but as an animal, a friend, a king, a father. Each story offers an example of wise relationship grounded in understanding rather than control. The lessons are quiet but profound. Love does not mean shaping another in your image. Love means allowing another to unfold as they are, while you remain a stable presence. One story tells of the Bodhisattva as a deer who risks his own life to protect a fawn caught in danger. The lesson isn't about heroism, it's about selfless care without attachment. The deer doesn't save the fawn to be praised. He acts because compassion moves him. There's no ownership in his love, only response. This reflects something essential in parenting. So often, care becomes entangled with ego. You want your children to succeed, to be happy, to avoid pain. But underneath that desire can live fear. A fear that you'll be blamed if they fail, that you'll be judged if they struggle, that their freedom will reveal your vulnerability. Control grows from that fear. You start to micromanage. You correct not because it's needed, but because it comforts your anxiety. But children are not projects. They are not extensions of your will. They are beings with their own path. And your role is not to mold them, it is to meet them, to offer structure without suffocation, to guide without demanding, to love without needing to possess. The Jataka tales help return parenting to its rightful place, not as a job to complete, but as a relationship to be lived with awareness. You stop focusing only on outcomes and start paying attention to the atmosphere you create. Are you offering safety or just rules? Are you listening or only instructing? Are you open to who they are becoming, or are you trying to keep them inside an idea of who they should be? This kind of parenting requires surrender, not giving up responsibility, but giving up the illusion of control. You still show up, you still offer boundaries, but you stop trying to engineer a perfect life. You stop reacting from fear. You start responding from trust. This doesn't mean you abandon your role. It means you become more skillful in it. You understand that each child is different, not only in temperament, but in karma. Their journey will not mirror yours. Their lessons will not arrive on your schedule. Your job is not to prevent suffering. Your job is to help them develop the tools to face life with clarity and strength. This shift from control to trust changes everything. You speak with more calm. You listen with more patience. You hold consequences without aggression. You stop trying to win every argument. You stop needing to be right. You start showing your own humanity, your own mistakes, your own learning process, and in doing so, you teach humility. The Buddha's path is not about erasing emotion, it's about seeing through it. You will still feel frustration, you will still worry, but you won't be ruled by it. You will learn to pause, to breathe, to remember that parenting is a practice, not a performance. Another Jataka tale tells of the Bodhisattva as a prince who gives up his wealth to serve others. When his family protests, he responds not with anger but with presence. He doesn't convince them with words. He lets his example speak. This is another kind of parenting, not leading by pressure, but by embodiment. Children absorb your nervous system more than your advice. They learn how to treat themselves by how you treat yourself. They notice when you rest, when you apologize, when you allow space for not knowing. They remember your tone more than your lectures. Surrendering control in parenting also means accepting impermanence. Children change, their needs shift. Their identity unfolds in ways you may not expect. If you hold too tightly to who they were, you miss who they are becoming. If you attach to one phase, you resist their growth. But if you stay present, you move with them, you adapt. You evolve together. This kind of presence builds trust, not just between parent and child, but within the child themselves. They begin to trust their experience. They feel seen, not for who you want them to be, but for who they are. And from that trust, confidence grows. Not the brittle confidence of performance, but the grounded confidence of authenticity. Surrender also helps you face your own past. Often, what you try to control in your children reflects what feels unfinished in yourself. If you were shamed, you try to prevent shame. If you felt invisible, you try to protect their identity. These efforts are human, but they are not always conscious. The more you become aware of your own conditioning, the less you project it onto them. You begin to relate to parenting as part of your own awakening. Your children become your teachers. They reveal where you still grasp, where you still fear, where you still try to shape life instead of meeting it. And every time you pause instead of react, every time you listen instead of interrupt, every time you stay instead of fix, you return to the heart of the path. You return to compassion, not as sentiment, but as strength, not as indulgence, but as clarity. This is what the Jataka tales invite, a way of parenting that is both wise and kind, structured and soft, present and unattached, a way of raising others without losing yourself, a way of releasing control without abandoning care. You still guide, you still show up, but now your guidance comes from presence, not fear. Let your parenting become part of your practice. Let your letting go become your greatest teaching. Let your love be large enough to not need control. When you begin to let go of control in parenting, when you soften into the unknown and trust more than you instruct, the lessons start to ripple outward. What begins at home doesn't stay there. The capacity to listen without defending, to respond without force, to stay open while holding boundaries, these qualities are not just for raising children. They are the foundation for navigating all relationships, especially the difficult ones. And the most difficult are often marked by conflict. Conflict stirs something primal, the urge to win, to justify, to defend, to control. Words become weapons. Silence becomes armor. You feel your body tighten, your heart races. You start seeing the other person not as they are, but as a threat. And in those moments, the mind tells you that control will fix it, that force will bring peace, that proving your point will settle the tension. But this has never worked, not truly. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a different path, a middle path that doesn't collapse into passivity and doesn't explode into aggression, a path of non-resistance, not avoidance, not weakness, a deep, embodied presence that meets conflict with clarity instead of reaction. This is a form of surrender, but not one that disappears, one that transforms. Non-resistance begins by letting go of the need to win, the need to dominate the conversation, the need to be the one who is right. This doesn't mean you agree with what's wrong. It means you stop believing that your inner peace depends on changing the other person. You stop tying your freedom to their behavior. This shift is not soft in the way people assume. It is courageous, because it means staying open in discomfort. It means not using blame as a shield. It means letting someone else's anger move through the space without needing to match it. It means pausing when everything in you wants to defend. In the moment of conflict, this pause is power. It allows you to feel your feet, to notice your breath, to recognize your triggers without being ruled by them. You begin to sense the energy underneath the words, not just the words themselves. You feel the tightness in your jaw, the rising heat in your chest, the sharp edges of judgment forming in your mind. And instead of feeding them, you witness them. This witnessing is not withdrawal, it is presence. You stay engaged, you listen, you speak from the center, not from the edge. You say what is true without needing to hurt. You stay in the room without disappearing. This is what makes non-resistance transformative. It doesn't deny conflict, it meets it with awareness. It stops adding fuel to the fire and starts revealing the roots of it. Sometimes the root is fear, sometimes shame, sometimes misunderstanding. Often, it's a lifetime of unspoken pain. When you refuse to escalate, something surprising can happen. The conflict begins to lose its shape, not because you forced peace, but because you stopped contributing to the cycle. This doesn't guarantee resolution, but it does guarantee clarity. You begin to see your part more clearly, not for blame, but for liberation. You see where your own expectations have turned into demands, where your voice was trying to control, not connect. where your silence was not compassion, but avoidance. In non-resistance, surrender looks like this. You no longer believe you need to crush your opponent to be safe. You no longer collapse your truth to avoid discomfort. You begin to speak from a grounded place, not because you want to be heard, but because you are clear. The outcome matters less than your alignment in the moment. This kind of surrender strengthens your boundaries. It shows you what you will stand for, not from aggression, but from stillness. You say no without hatred. You say yes without pressure. You stop swinging between extremes. You hold your ground with compassion, not with control. The Buddha once said that hatred does not end through hatred. It ends through love. But this love is not sentimental. It is fierce and rooted. It does not avoid the truth. It holds the truth with gentleness and refuses to make an enemy out of another human being. This doesn't mean you tolerate harm. It means you stop harming back. You leave situations when needed. You protect yourself when it's wise. But you do it with awareness, not with vengeance. You stop carrying the conflict inside long after it ends. You stop rehearsing your defense over and over. You let it pass through. This letting go is not forgetting, it's freedom. When you surrender your grip on being right, you make room to understand. You hear what is beneath the surface. You learn what the other person cannot say directly. You start to feel the brokenness behind the anger. And when you meet that pain with presence, it often softens even if the person can't name why. This kind of energy shifts the dynamic. You become the calm center in the storm. You do not provoke. You do not collapse. You do not control. You reflect what is possible when someone stays rooted in themselves. Over time, this practice teaches others how to meet you differently. They begin to expect less resistance, less noise, less manipulation, and in that space, something honest can finally emerge. Even if it doesn't, you are still free, because your well-being is no longer tied to being right, to being agreed with, to being obeyed. It is tied to your own clarity. This doesn't mean you always get it right. You'll still lose your temper. You'll still shut down, but the difference is you'll notice it faster. You'll return quicker. You'll apologize without needing to be asked. You'll forgive without needing an apology first. This is how conflict becomes practice, not something to avoid, but something to learn from, a mirror that shows you your patterns, a teacher that shows you where you still grasp, where you still fear, where you still forget who you are. And when you remember, you surrender again, not to the other person, but to truth, to peace, to the moment. Let the next time you are misunderstood be a practice in softening. Let the next disagreement become an invitation to listen without defense. Let the next conflict become a place where peace is planted, not forced. When you stop meeting conflict with resistance, when you surrender the need to control how others act or react, a deeper challenge begins to surface: the need to be understood, not just heard, but truly seen, recognized, confirmed. And when that doesn't happen, the pain feels personal. You question your worth. You repeat conversations in your mind. You wait for validation like it's air. But what if peace doesn't require being understood at all? This kind of surrender is subtle. The attachment isn't loud. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it hides behind helpfulness, honesty, or even spiritual language. You explain your feelings with care, hoping they'll see your heart. You speak truthfully, expecting empathy. But when the response doesn't come, when your depth is overlooked or misread, you're left with a silent ache, the ache of invisibility. In Buddhist practice, this ache becomes a doorway, because it shows you something essential. It shows you that being misunderstood is not the source of suffering. Attachment to being understood is the clinging to image, the desire for reflection, the belief that others must mirror your inner world for it to be real. This is where the suffering lives. Letting go of that need is not indifference, it is maturity. It's the shift from external dependence to internal steadiness. It's learning to rest in your own knowing, even when it isn't mirrored. It's releasing others from the responsibility of proving your truth. When you stop needing to be understood, your words become cleaner. You speak without hidden agendas. You don't use honesty to manipulate. You don't package your pain in ways that beg for approval. You speak to share, not to control how others respond. This shift also changes how you listen. You stop listening only to reply or to find your own reflection. You begin to receive people where they are, even when they don't meet you in the same place. You start to see that not every connection requires deep understanding to be meaningful. That presence can exist even when perception is imperfect. Letting go of this need is not about isolation. It's about freedom. You stop making your peace dependent on someone else's capacity to receive you. You stop expecting others to carry your depth. You start trusting that your truth doesn't need constant validation to remain true. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care in a different way. You love without bargaining. You connect without clinging. You express without expecting. And when misunderstanding happens, which it always will, you don't collapse. You stay rooted. You stay clear. You stay open. There's a story in the Buddhist tradition of the Buddha remaining silent when accused unjustly. His silence wasn't cold. It wasn't passive. It was rooted in wisdom. He knew that trying to explain his innocence to someone who wasn't ready to hear it would only deepen their delusion. His clarity did not depend on their agreement. This is the power of non-defensiveness. Not because you don't have a response, but because you don't need to be seen a certain way to feel whole. You start trusting that the truth will do its work without your management. You begin to feel the peace that comes when you no longer need to be constantly validated. This doesn't mean you suppress your voice. It means you express from a place that doesn't depend on outcome. You no longer say things just to be right, to gain sympathy, or to control the emotional landscape of others. You speak because there is something clear to say, and then you let it go. Letting go of the need to be understood also reveals hidden pride. The belief that your view is superior, your heart more pure, your pain more refined. You begin to notice the subtle ways the ego tries to build identity through depth, through insight, through sensitivity. When that identity isn't seen or valued, it reacts, it defends, it withdraws. But when you release this clinging, something else opens humility, the kind that doesn't shrink but softens, the kind that doesn't announce itself but simply listens. Humility lets others misunderstand you without needing to fix their perception. Humility lets you remain present even when you are misread. This space is not empty, it's rich. It's where compassion grows, because the more you release the need to be seen, the more clearly you see others. You recognize that everyone is carrying their own lens, their own past, their own pain, their own filters. You stop trying to force your way through those filters. You meet people where they are not where you wish they would be. This also frees your relationships. You stop testing people with your vulnerability. You stop resenting them for not knowing what you didn't say. You stop needing them to hold what you are still learning to hold yourself. And you begin to choose where and how to be known more wisely. You share more slowly. You observe more carefully. You respect timing. You stop rushing intimacy. You stop equating closeness with total understanding. You start recognizing that the deepest intimacy often comes not from being completely seen, but from being completely present even when you are not. This way of relating requires inner strength. It asks you to trust your path even when it is lonely. It asks you to stop proving, performing, persuading. It asks you to remember that your inner life is not a product for others to review. It is your practice, your sanctuary, your unfolding. And in this surrender, something beautiful appears. Silence no longer feels like erasure. Misunderstanding no longer feels like danger. You begin to find safety in being unknown. You begin to feel the lightness of not needing to manage perception. You begin to remember that your peace was never meant to depend on anyone else's understanding. You also become more honest with yourself. You start to notice where your need to be understood has led you to over-explain, to compromise your truth, to abandon your boundaries. You begin to reclaim the parts of you that were hidden, not because they were wrong, but because you feared they wouldn't be received. Now, you welcome those parts back. Not with pride, not with performance, but with quiet belonging. You belong to yourself, not in opposition to others, but in wholeness that includes them, without depending on them. Letting go of being understood doesn't mean becoming distant. It means becoming steady. It means you can still offer your truth without fear, still love without attachment, still stand without resistance. You stop chasing connection as a way to soothe your doubt. You start offering connection from a place of inner fullness. You become easier to be around because your presence is not a demand, it is an offering. And that offering transforms everything not by force, but by depth. Let this be your practice now. Let silence hold what others don't yet understand. Let clarity remain even when you're misread. Let your heart stay open even when it's not fully seen. After letting go of the need to be understood, a deep stillness begins to grow inside you. You no longer chase approval. You no longer bend your truth to be seen. You speak, you listen, and you rest in your own clarity. But as soon as you return to the world, another force begins to pull at you quietly, relentlessly, and often without your awareness. This pull doesn't come through a person or a conversation, it comes through a screen. In the modern age, attention is currency. Devices demand it, platforms shape it, and algorithms feed on it. Every notification, every scroll, every click is part of a system designed to capture your mind and keep it spinning. And the mind, already conditioned to crave control, gets seduced by the illusion that technology makes life more manageable. That if you just respond fast enough, stay informed enough, post frequently enough, track everything, and never miss a message, you'll finally be at peace. But peace doesn't come. Instead, the days blur. The body tightens, the breath shortens, the mind grows more scattered, and slowly, without noticing, you stop living your life directly. You begin living through filters organized by apps, interrupted by alerts, weighed down by digital noise. This is not a rejection of technology, it's a call to wake up inside it. Buddhism doesn't label things as good or bad. It teaches you to look deeply, to ask, what is this creating in me? Is it clarity or confusion? Freedom or clinging? Mindfulness or reaction? Digital over-control is subtle. It masks itself as productivity. You make lists, sync calendars, reply quickly. But underneath is often a fear of being left behind, of missing out, of not being seen. So you check again and again. The habit becomes compulsive. Not because you're weak, but because your mind was never designed to process this much stimulation this fast for this long. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from craving, aversion, and ignorance. Digital life encourages all three, craving through the endless desire for likes, attention, novelty, aversion through outrage, comparison, distraction, ignorance through the unconscious habits that fill your day without reflection. Mindful reorientation begins by noticing how often your fingers move before your awareness does. How often you reach for your device in silence, in discomfort, in boredom. Not because you need to, but because you forgot how to simply be. Awakening within digital life is not about complete disconnection, it's about intimacy. Can you be fully present while using a device? Can you bring the same attention to one email that you would bring to your breath? Can you feel your body as you scroll? Can you notice your breath as you type? This is not easy. The digital world is built for speed, but awakening requires slowness. So the first step is pause. Not dramatic withdrawal, just a breath before you touch the screen. Just a heartbeat before you respond. Just enough space to ask, is this necessary? Is this kind? Is this true? The next step is simplification. You don't need to track everything. You don't need to read every headline. You don't need to be instantly available. When you try to control every part of your digital experience, it begins to control you. Simplicity is not about minimalism as aesthetics. It's about function. Does this serve presence, or does it scatter it? Begin to observe your habits. When do you reach for your phone? What are you avoiding? What are you hoping to feel? What do you feel instead? The screen often promises relief, but delivers restlessness. The promise of connection leads to more comparison. The promise of productivity often leads to burnout. Buddhist practice brings the attention back inward. You begin to turn toward the discomfort you were trying to scroll past. You feel your loneliness without masking it in content. You sit with your restlessness instead of numbing it through notifications. This return to discomfort is not punishment, it's healing. Because it teaches you that you don't have to run. That peace is not found in more input. It is found in meeting the moment exactly as it is, even when it's quiet, awkward, or slow. From this space, intentional habits can be built. You begin to set boundaries not to restrict yourself, but to protect your clarity. You turn off what distracts. You make space for silence. You schedule less. You answer when you're truly present. You begin to experience digital tools as tools, not as extensions of your nervous system. And your nervous system begins to shift. The addiction to stimulation lessens. The mind starts to settle. The need to always be plugged in softens. You start to feel joy in small things. Again, conversations without interruption, meals without screens, walks without podcasts. This doesn't make you less engaged. It makes you more alive, because now your attention is not split. Your presence is not leaking. You begin to engage fully with what you choose. You respond with care. You create with intention. You stop multitasking your way out of your own life. Digital life can also become part of the practice itself. You bring mindfulness to how you read, how you share, how you consume. You stop spreading outrage without reflection. You stop posting just for validation. You begin to use your voice with honesty, with kindness, with care. You also become more generous with your silence. You stop needing to fill every moment with updates. You begin to appreciate the power of not responding right away, the beauty of waiting, the wisdom of choosing your words carefully. Letting go of control in digital life is an act of reclaiming your humanity. It's remembering that you are not a machine, that your worth is not measured by your output, that your peace is not found in your screen time. It is found in the space between tasks, in the breath between alerts, in the pauses you choose. And in choosing those pauses, you reclaim choice itself. You are no longer driven by reactivity. You become responsive, conscious, softly awake, in the middle of an overactive world. This path is not about perfection, it's about attention. It's about returning again and again to the question, who am I when I stop performing for the screen? Who am I when I stop reaching for control? The answer is always here. In stillness, in simplicity, in presence. Once the noise of digital life begins to quiet, once your presence is no longer scattered across platforms, something more honest begins to surface. Without constant stimulation, the mind turns inward. You start to feel things more fully. You start to notice the places where your attention was masking a deeper attachment, not to information or devices, but to identity. And one identity, especially for those walking the path of practice, can be the hardest to release: the role of the helper. Helping others appears noble. It is encouraged, praised, and often expected. It feels purposeful. It gives you direction. But when helping becomes a role you cling to, it can shift from compassion to control. It can begin to create suffering, not just for others, but for you. The teachings of Buddhism guide you toward compassion, but also toward wisdom. True compassion does not require you to fix. It does not ask you to be the savior, the rescuer, the one who always knows what to do. True compassion sees clearly. It acts without attachment. It cares without needing credit. It loves without needing to be needed. Letting go of helping is not a rejection of kindness. It is the surrender of ego's involvement in service. It is the release of the subtle grasping that says, "I must be the one to heal, to guide, to hold everything together." That grasping can wear many faces. It may show up as constant advice-giving, as discomfort in silence, as the inability to watch someone struggle, as the habit of stepping in before someone asks. Underneath it, there's often a hidden fear that without this role, you won't be seen. That if you stop helping, your worth will be questioned. That if you allow others to walk their path, even when it's hard, you'll be blamed for stepping back. But the Dharma teaches you to look deeper, to see what's really driving your actions. When helping becomes a way to secure identity, it becomes a form of clinging. And clinging, even to something virtuous, leads to suffering. Compassion means presence, and presence requires spaciousness. If you fill every gap with advice, with comfort, with solutions, you rob others of their own wisdom. You interrupt their unfolding. You try to carry what may not be yours to hold. Letting go of helping allows for a different kind of loved one that honors autonomy, one that respects silence, one that doesn't rush in to protect others from their own lessons. There is a story in the Buddhist tradition of a monk who tried to shield another from suffering by offering comfort too soon. Instead of healing, it delayed growth. Because some truths need to be touched directly. Some awakenings require discomfort. And not every pain is meant to be avoided. To truly help, you must release the impulse to take away pain at any cost. You must learn to sit beside suffering without trying to rearrange it. You must learn to trust that others have their own path, their own timing, their own inner teacher. This is the wisdom that balances compassion. Without it, helping becomes interference. With it, helping becomes spacious, honest, and free of attachment. This letting go can feel unnatural. It challenges the idea that your value lies in how useful you are. It invites you to be with others without being the solution. It asks you to stop performing goodness and to start embodying presence. It may mean holding your tongue. It may mean walking away. It may mean allowing someone to fall not out of cruelty, but out of deep respect. This is where compassion becomes subtle. It no longer seeks to rescue, it seeks to accompany. It no longer offers solutions before being asked. It waits, it listens, it honors boundaries. And in doing so, it becomes safer, more real, more trustworthy. Letting go of helping also means facing your discomfort with powerlessness. Watching someone struggle and not stepping in can feel unbearable. But that feeling is not a sign to act, it is a mirror. It shows you where you still resist the truth that suffering is part of life. Not all pain is a mistake. Not all difficulty needs to be removed. Sometimes the most compassionate act is to stop interrupting the process. You begin to trust that silence can be healing, that presence is often more powerful than words, that your being, rooted and open, may offer more than any advice ever could. This surrender also protects you from burnout. When you believe you must always help, always hold space, always fix, you drain yourself, you become resentful, you begin to give from depletion. Letting go means you recognize your limits, not as a failure, but as part of your practice. This honesty becomes a form of compassion too toward yourself. You begin to care for your own needs without guilt. You learn to say no without shutting your heart. You stop using helping as a way to escape your own pain. You also begin to see others more clearly. Without the lens of fixing, you start to see their strength, their resilience, their capacity to grow. You begin to trust their path, not in theory, but in practice. You stop assuming they are broken. You start recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing you can offer is space. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care differently. You check your motivation before offering support. You wait to be invited. You ask before acting. You share with humility. You listen without trying to lead. And when you are called to help, you do so with presence, not urgency, with clarity, not control, with compassion, not agenda. This is how helping transforms. It becomes a gift, not a strategy, a gesture, not a role. It flows from awareness, not from fear, and it nourishes both the giver and the receiver. The Buddha's path invites you to see every moment as an opportunity to wake up, even moments where you want to help, especially those, because in those moments, your deepest attachments are revealed: the need to be good, to be needed, to be seen as kind. Letting go of those reveals a different kind of kindness, one that doesn't grasp, one that doesn't control, one that simply shows up steady and silent and asks nothing in return. Let your next act of love be smaller, quieter, slower. Let your presence speak more than your words. Let your heart remain open, even when you do nothing at all. When you release the grip on being the helper, when you stop measuring love by your ability to fix, what begins to emerge is something quieter, a sense of space. Not the absence of care, but the beginning of a deeper offering. You're no longer acting from urgency. You're no longer proving anything. You're simply available. And this availability is the doorway into one of the most paradoxical vows on the Buddhist path, a Bodhisattva vow. It is a promise that seems impossible: to remain in this world not for escape, not for personal enlightenment alone, but for the awakening of all beings. It's not a goal. It's not an accomplishment. It's a letting go so profound that it becomes the path itself. On the surface, it sounds noble, almost heroic. But if you look closer, it is not built on control or ambition. It's built on surrender. To make such a vow means stepping out of the mindset of personal gain. It means setting aside the comfort of clear outcomes. It means living without a finish line. The Bodhisattva does not serve because the path is efficient. The Bodhisattva serves because compassion no longer asks for permission. This is not about becoming selfless in the way the ego imagines. It is not erasing yourself. It's awakening to the truth that the self was never a separate, fixed entity to begin with. And from that realization, the walls that kept love conditional start to dissolve. You no longer give to be recognized. You no longer wait to feel ready. You simply open, again and again, to the suffering and beauty of this world and meet it as it is. To walk this path is to give up control over your impact. You may serve someone who never thanks you. You may speak truth that no one listens to. You may care for people who change nothing. And still, you stay, not because you believe you can save the world, but because love is no longer dependent on results. This vow demands that you surrender your ideas of progress. It asks you to release the fantasy that you will one day arrive at a place where suffering no longer touches you. You don't vow to serve because it's easy. You vow to serve because there is no separation left between yourself and the world around you. This is a vow made in the face of uncertainty. You don't get to know how long it will take. You don't get to decide who changes and who doesn't. You simply offer your presence over and over, like water shaping stone, without demand, without hurry, without needing to control what will grow. The Bodhisattva path is a form of radical non-control, because it removes the illusion that your actions need to have visible, measurable effects in order to matter. It teaches that planting a seed is enough, even if you never see the tree. That showing up in presence is enough, even if the moment passes unspoken. That your care, when free of agenda, becomes something vast. This kind of surrender doesn't look dramatic. It shows up in small, consistent ways. In choosing patience instead of irritation. In listening instead of correcting. In staying with someone's pain without trying to turn it into a lesson. In being okay with not being the one who gets credit. You stop needing to shape life. You begin to meet life. You're not driven by what you think should happen. You become available to what is happening. The vow also reshapes your goals. You may still have aspirations, but they're no longer about personal success or spiritual achievement. They're about alignment, about integrity, about the intention behind your actions. You stop needing the world to validate your choices. You rest in the knowing that your life is being used for something larger than self-protection. This way of being doesn't erase boundaries. It doesn't mean letting others walk over you or drain you. It means you learn to give without attachment. You serve because you're no longer trapped in the belief that life is about your preferences. The Bodhisattva does not seek reward. They seek truth. And truth often appears in places that are uncomfortable. You may be called to serve where it's inconvenient, to speak where it's unpopular, to care where it's not returned. You do it anyway, not from martyrdom, from freedom, because you are no longer hooked by outcomes. You are moved by compassion. This does not mean you abandon your needs. It means you begin to see them in context. You feed your body, not out of vanity, but to have energy to serve. You rest, not because you're escaping the world, but because you know exhaustion closes the heart. You tend to your mind so that it remains clear not for achievement, but for presence. This vow is not made once. It's made over and over. Each time you feel the pull to grasp, or fix, or defend, and you choose instead to open. Each time you notice yourself wanting recognition, and you return to quiet giving. Each time you lose your way, and still begin again. To vow to awaken for the benefit of all beings is to accept that you cannot control when that awakening happens, for yourself or for anyone else. And still, you stay. You serve not from strategy, but from surrender. This path teaches you to see the sacred in the mundane. Every act becomes an offering, making tea for a friend, sitting quietly with someone in pain, picking up the phone when you'd rather not, holding a boundary with love, saying no with clarity, saying yes with care. You begin to walk through life less like a person chasing meaning and more like a presence creating it. You don't need every interaction to feel profound. You just need to show up. You don't need every choice to be right. You just need to stay connected to your intention. This kind of life leaves a different trace. It may not always be noticed, but it is felt. You create spaces where others can be real. You model what it means to stay soft in a hard world. You move with the kind of quiet that reminds people of their own depth. The Bodhisattva vow is not a destination. It is a direction. It points you back again and again to the present, to the moment where you choose not to control, not to force, not to retreat, but to meet life exactly as it is, with as much love as you can. Let this moment be that choice. Let your vow live not in words, but in your next action. Let service flow not from pressure, but from presence. After stepping into the vow to serve all beings, not from ambition, but from presence, the heart learns something rare. It learns how to keep offering without needing to win, without needing to fix, without needing to disappear. But as this surrender deepens, a new question quietly arises. How do you keep surrender from becoming passivity? How do you remain engaged in life without falling into force or fading into helplessness? This is where the Buddha's core teaching reveals its full brilliance. The middle way, a path that avoids extremes. Not halfway between two poles, but a dynamic centera space of wisdom that balances effort with ease, courage with rest, clarity with humility. And when it comes to surrender, this balance is everything. Surrender is often misunderstood. One version turns into domination where you control outcomes, force direction, demand certainty. The other turns into collapse where you give up, stay silent, stop caring. But true surrender is neither. It is not about being passive, nor about being aggressive. It is about being rooted, responsive, and deeply aware of the conditions you are living in. To walk the middle way in surrender is to trust life without withdrawing from it. You let go of the illusion that you control the whole story, but you remain committed to participating in it fully. You stop trying to write every chapter in advance. You start listening to the moment and moving with it, not ahead of it, not behind it. This is an active surrender. It asks for discernment. It means you stay engaged, but without gripping. You keep showing up, but without demanding that things look a certain way. You care deeply, but you no longer tie your identity to outcomes. It is not neutrality, it is presence. When people fall into extremes, it is often because of fear. The fear that if they stop pushing, nothing will move, or the fear that if they try again, they'll fail once more. But the middle way invites you to meet those fears without being led by them. It asks you to act when it's time and rest when it's time, based on pressure, but on insight. This balance shows up in daily life again and again. You face a challenge. One part of you wants to control it completely. Another wants to walk away. Surrender on the middle way is choosing neither. It is staying close to the situation with clarity. You pause. You listen. You act only when the action is wise, not when it is impulsive, not when it's a reaction to your own discomfort. This is not easy. It requires a level of self-awareness that can only come from practice. You have to watch your own patterns, the places where you tend to dominate, the places where you tend to withdraw. You begin to catch the moment when urgency takes over, and you soften. You notice when you want to shut down, and you breathe instead. In this balance, surrender becomes skillful. It becomes compassionate. It honors timing. It respects reality. You do what you can, and then you let go. You bring effort, but without strain. You release control, but not responsibility. You speak your truth, but you don't impose it. The middle way reminds you that wisdom does not come from force, and it doesn't come from silence born of fear. It comes from grounded presence, from the willingness to stay right where you are, awake to what is actually needed, not what your ego thinks should happen. This kind of surrender often feels subtle. There's no big release, no dramatic gesture. It's the small shift from tightening to softening, the small breath between thought and action, the willingness to be gentle with yourself and others, even when things feel uncertain. In relationships, this balance allows for real connection. You're not trying to change the other person, and you're not erasing yourself. You show up honestly, you listen. You let the space between you be open enough for truth, but steady enough to hold care. You stop managing people's reactions. You start trusting your own integrity. In work, it helps you stop chasing perfection. You put in effort where it matters, but you let go of micromanagement. You stop using productivity as proof of your value. You rest when rest is needed. You step back when clarity fades. You stop needing to control every outcome to feel safe. In spiritual practice, it frees you from the idea that progress looks a certain way. You stop measuring your stillness. You stop trying to reach enlightenment like it's a prize. You sit, you breathe, you return. And you begin to trust that presence itself is enough. This path also helps you face difficulty without turning away. When pain arises, the controlling mind wants to solve it. The passive mind wants to ignore it. The surrendered mind on the middle way feels it fully and responds with care, not with overreaction, not with avoidance, but with steady compassion. Over time, you begin to recognize the feel of balance in your body. Effort feels spacious, not tight. Speaking feels clear, not urgent. Waiting feels intentional, not passive. You become sensitive to the energy behind your actions, and that sensitivity becomes your compass. You also begin to forgive yourself more easily. You understand that falling into extremes is part of learning. That surrender is not a destination, it's a rhythm. You lose the balance, you come back, over and over. That coming back is the path. This way of surrender becomes a refuge. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer at war with it. You don't collapse when things change. You don't force what isn't ready. You meet each moment with the question, what is the most loving thing I can do right now? Sometimes the answer is action. Sometimes it's stillness. Sometimes it's speaking. Sometimes it's silence. But it's always rooted in awareness, not in fear, not in control. This is surrender as wisdom, surrender as alignment, surrender as a middle way, not halfway between extremes, but fully alive in the present moment, with your heart open and your hands free. Let this be your next step. Let this be your breath. Let this be enough. When surrender becomes balance, when you stop swinging between extremes and learn to move with steadiness, another layer reveals itself. The place where attachment often hides the deepest. The space where even wise practitioners struggle to let go. That space is love. Love opens you. It softens your voice, your body, your plans. It pulls you closer to others and teaches you care in a way nothing else can. But even in its beauty, love can easily become entangled with fear. And without realizing it, the heart begins to grip. You hold too tightly. You worry too often. You give too much or expect too much. You mistake possession for intimacy. You mistake control for connection. The Buddhist path invites you to love fully, but without clinging, not by distancing, not by suppressing, but by changing the quality of your heart. Two practices guide this transformation: metta, or loving, kindness, and upekkha, or equanimity. Metta is not attachment disguised as love. It's not based on getting your needs met. It's not about how someone completes you. Metta asks, can you wish someone well even when they don't choose you? Can you love without turning it into a transaction? Can you care without needing to be rewarded or understood? This form of love doesn't cling because it doesn't depend on outcome. It flows from your nature, not your insecurity. It doesn't close when the person changes. It doesn't tighten when you feel afraid. It keeps offering warmth not because of who they are, but because of who you are. To love like this, the heart must let go of control. You stop trying to shape others. You stop needing to be central in their story. You let people come and go without making their movements mean something about your worth. You feel the sadness when they drift. You feel the joy when they return. But you stop gripping. You stop needing love to look a certain way to feel safe. Upekkha is what allows metta to remain steady. Without equanimity, love collapses into attachment. You give, but you want something back. You love, but you need a certain response. When metta meets upekkha, love becomes balanced. It's soft, but not clingy. It's warm, but not fragile. You wish others well, and you also accept their path even if it leads away from you. Equanimity does not mean detachment. It means the ability to remain stable when your hopes are not fulfilled. It means you can care deeply without being shaken by every shift. You still feel, you still show up, but you don't collapse. You don't lose yourself. This way of loving challenges the common idea that closeness means control. That to love someone is to worry about them constantly. That to be a partner is to fix, manage, or merge completely. In truth, love deepens when you give space, when you allow others to be fully who they are, when you stop editing your truth to keep them close. Letting go in love means recognizing that you cannot prevent change. That connection doesn't depend on holding tightly. It depends on your capacity to remain open even when it hurts. Even when the relationship shifts into a new shape. Even when the person doesn't love you the way you hoped they would. This kind of letting go also heals codependency. The belief that your peace depends on someone else's mood, choices, or attention. You stop defining yourself by how well you are loved. You begin to love without losing your voice. You begin to see that your presence, your wholeness, is already enough. You become honest with yourself, with others. You stop pretending you're okay when you're not. You stop twisting your truth just to keep the peace. You start showing up as you are, loving without begging, giving without depletion, trusting without needing constant proof. This doesn't mean you accept unkindness. It means you learn the difference between love and attachment. Love nourishes, attachment drains. Love frees, attachment grasps. Love holds lightly. Attachment clutches tightly, afraid to let go. You begin to see that love without clinging is not less love, it's deeper love. It's love that allows others to grow even if it changes the relationship. It's love that honors your boundaries and theirs. It's love that trusts that freedom and connection are not opposites. In practice, this means pausing when the urge to control arises. It means noticing when your care turns into anxiety. It means asking yourself, is this love or is this fear? Am I holding space or am I trying to manage them? Am I being generous or am I trading care for approval? These questions are not for judgment, they're for clarity. Because once you see clearly, you can choose differently. You can soften the grasp. You can speak with more presence. You can give with less expectation. Letting go in love also means letting go of stories. The story of how the relationship was supposed to unfold. The story of who you are when you're with them. The story of what should have been. You let the stories rest. You meet the moment without needing it to match your plan. From here, relationships become more alive, more real. You stop rehearsing connection. You start participating in it. You listen more deeply. You speak more gently. You stop trying to protect yourself from heartbreak by staying half-closed. This doesn't make love easy, but it makes it free. And in that freedom, you find something rare. You begin to trust that love doesn't have to be permanent to be sacred, that it doesn't have to end a certain way to be worthwhile, that its value is not in its duration, but in its presence. You stop needing to hold on so tightly, because now you know that love is not something you keep, it's something you live. Let this be your practice. Let go of control in love, not to distance yourself, but to meet it more clearly. Let love flow through you, not get stuck inside you. Let your presence be the offering, not your grip. And now, as your body settles and your breath softens, you've journeyed through something far deeper than words. You've walked the path of letting go, not as escape, but as return. You've seen that surrender isn't weakness, but clarity. That control doesn't bring safety, but tension. That peace lives not in holding tighter, but in opening wider. Through every lesson, from Zen koans to the silence of bowing, from the patience of parenting to the freedom of impermanence, you've touched the truth the Buddha lived and taught, that the more you release, the more you receive, and that the most powerful life is the one not built on control but on presence, compassion, and trust. Let tonight be a turning point, not dramatic, not loud, just one breath deeper into acceptance, one thought less attached, one moment more awake. If this journey has spoken to something inside you, share your reflection in the comments. Write, "I'm learning to let go," to remind yourself and others that surrender is a shared path. And if you'd like to keep walking this path together, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell. More calm, more wisdom, more space to breathe right when you need it. Now rest quietly. You are already enough. Let go. Let be. Good night.